Hello, everyone. Cheshire the Cat on the scene over here with my buddy Fake Emo Jace. Uh, and we are going to talk about a history of horror games just because, as far as I can tell, you are interested in game development, yes?
I am not only interested in game development, I am currently studying video game design at college. I'm also currently procrastinating a lot of homework from said video game design college.
So I'm your excuse to not get homework done.
I needed one. Thank you for helping me with that.
Of course. Um, just a quick summarize a couple of things that I want to go over. So the idea of this is we're just gonna kind of talk back and forth about experience with games, and I'm gonna share I've got a fact check right here on my phone about a chronological list of horror games that came out, and as you're going into game design, I'd love to see your input as someone who's learning game design as we go down this list.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess we'll start off with Magnavox's Haunted House 1972. So I've never heard of this game. I actually don't know anything of this game, but I know that there was a reference to it in a PC game that came out a few years ago called Untold Stories. And
Heard of that.
Untold Stories was 4 separate games in one, and they all led to the same story. But the idea was you were basically playing a Commodore 64 text-based roleplay game. And I'm assuming you know what an input command looks like on a PC, when you see the input command prompt.
I believe so.
So imagine that, but it gives you paragraphs to read, and then you have to type the command in for what you want to do next, and you have to get the command right to get to the next thing.
Okay.
So it would be the text would say something like, you approach a house, there's all this in the yard, you find things here, there's an engine flopped over on its side, and then you would have to type in look engine, or look at engine to get the next prompt.
Yeah.
So does coding work similarly in games now with how they set up flags for interacting with things?
I guess. To be honest, I'm not really that into the programming aspect. So in my university, there are 2 different careers related to video games.
Okay.
One is video game design, which is the one I'm on, and the other one is video game programming. And basically I focus more on the artistic element, which is character design, level design, and stuff like that. So, for example, right now, the subjects I have are 3D character modeling. Well, I need to do some homework.
Okay.
Principles of 2D animation, level design, and history of modern art.
I actually love 2D games, and I'm happy to see some of them making a rise recently in some indie culture.
Yeah, I'm super happy about that. I like 2D games a lot. Thing is, I don't know, it's I never get that much into them for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, I mean,
I find it easier to get super duper into them. I think they're amazing though.
Well, I know you liked Metroid Dread. That's it's 3D models in a 3D map, but it plays as a 2-dimensional side scroller.
I do like 2D games quite a bit. It's not that I dislike 2D games, and I absolutely play them. I adore 2D games as well. It's just that I find an easier time getting into and getting absorbed in a 3D game than I do with a 2D game, and it's also that's actually reflected in my career in video game design, because I have a much harder time thinking of how to make mechanics for a 2D game than I do on how to make mechanics for a 3D game.
Huh.
Like, I feel like the space, the physical space of the world kind of like helps me, I don't know, I guess like just come up with ideas.
It creates more to stipulate off of when a game is 3-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but again, I have massive respect, and I do love 2D games quite a bit. But yeah, also, speaking of 2D games, well, not exactly 2D. I'm actually going to have to, this trimester, I'm actually making an isometric game.
See, isometric is an interesting one.
It's like 2.5D, I think.
And that is a huge part of what started making horror successful. That actually leads into one of the games that I'm going to bring up.
Horror.
Oh yeah.
Horror, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about spooky stuff. Well, funny, because I'm pretty sure I'll be uploading this in November, but happy Halloween, everyone.
Feliz Dia de los Muertos.
Dia de los Muertos. Sorry, I love that song. But no, getting back to the topic at hand. Before we get into like the 2.5D isometric cameras, there was between this game that I'm about to bring up and the rest, most horror games didn't really know where to go. So what we got were a lot of like NES games based on horror movies. Like there's an NES Halloween, there's an NES Friday the 13th.
I've seen the NES. I'm pretty sure I've seen the Friday the 13th one for the Atari before.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've had to see that at some point.
It was on the Atari, but it was also on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And the point of the game...
But having multi-platform games?
Yeah.
It was really rare at that time.
Well, because the movies were so popular that the Nintendo wanted to bank on them.
Yeah, but what I mean is, like, not just because... Nowadays, it's a lot easier because, like, the two main consoles are made a lot more to be like PCs, and they're a lot more architecturally similar to each other than, say, the Atari and the NES at that time. But they were so architecturally different. Nowadays, it's pretty much like almost expected that if you're developing a game for the PS5, it's probably gonna be able to run on the Xbox Series S as well, or Series X.
And they'll probably try to run it on the Switch at 30 FPS and 720.
Yeah, and on PC.
And it'll lag horribly.
Mainly because nowadays the architecture has become so streamlined to be like PCs.
Yeah.
Like, even to the point, like, doesn't the Switch use, like, NVIDIA graphics, an NVIDIA API or something?
Yeah, horribly, but it does.
I somewhat resent those, but only because I know they're true.
But reining back in, to the topic at hand, the other game that I want to bring up, is because this is technically the first 3D scary game. 3D Monster Maze, 1982.
Okay, let me see the picture. So, I'd argue that the very first horror game in that sense was, like, I don't remember what game it would have been, but, like, the first maze games, I think.
Yeah, it would have been even Pac-Man to a technicality, because you're running away from ghosts.
Yeah, I remember I wrote an essay for school about actually stealth games, and I said technically Pac-Man is one of the first stealth games.
Yeah, that's the truth. That would also
It's
go
like-
to the original Metal Gears, and
Yeah,
I'm wondering when
totally
the first rail
talk about-
shooter came out.
I mean, and this is something we should touch upon later as we get into it. I think that stealth and horror are two genres that meld together very, very well, and that almost always go hand in hand.
Oh yeah, just the tension itself is terrifying.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah. But what I mean is, I don't remember what it would have been called. I think it would have been called like Labyrinth or Maze or something. I'd argue that's technically some of the first horror game, because I genuinely actually consider mazes in and of themselves, especially in first person, to be scary. Just that idea of being lost.
That in and of itself is terrifying, and I will pull something closer to the end as we're going through this list, because how would you feel about a pop quiz where I play a game of is it or is it not horror? I'll do that with more modern games though, or like
Good with whatever.
Good with whatever.
Let's go.
All right, but let's continue down. Let's continue down the list first. Because the reason I bring up the Monster Maze from this list is because I've actually played this game. It's not like a super scary game. It doesn't make like big scary noises, but it does two things, and it's super simple, and that's what makes it scary. What you have is a flat screen made to resemble a 3D image, and you only press, and then you press 3 arrow keys, left, right, or forward.
You can't go back?
You can't go back. At least I don't think you could. You might have been able to go, like, back, but there would have been no point. But the idea is you're in a maze with... It says monster, but it looks like a chibi T-Rex, really. Like it looks silly. But the scare of the game is there's a text box at the bottom, and it'll say, like, you hear nothing. You move. You hear nothing. And for every 1 step you take, the monster can take 2 steps. So the game is moving at your speed. And the point is just to last as long as you can before the monster gets you. But you will find, like, the text on the bottom will change. It'll be like, you hear footsteps, or the monster sees you, or the monster runs towards you. And like those little things actually make it terrifying.
It was more for limitations of the time than it was for the choice of having it be that way. But I think having such like minimalistic text is partially what helps with that.
Which leads to...
It's not, oh, the monster has seen you, you should run now. It's, the monster sees you, run.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it says. The monster sees you, and then you're like, oh, I gotta move.
Yeah, like, I think having text that's that minimalistic does kind of help the horror of it.
And for anyone who's watching this video and is like a huge advocate of horror games, like, you know, like the long history of all horror games and survival horror and all this stuff, and is like, you're skipping a bunch of games, and so I was like, yeah, I know I am. We're kind of like touching and picking specific points that I do personally know, and that Jace may personally know.
Yes. Also, take into account, I am this thing called a coward. So. I'm not very familiar with horror games. But I haven't played that many horror games. I've become very familiar with them mostly because of, like, this game explained videos that I've watched a lot of for a long time, and, like, Let's Plays. Like, for example, Zeshi, I've talked to you about Silent Hill a lot. I've never actually played any Silent Hill game.
Really?
Yeah, I absolutely should. I really want to. And actually, now that Silent Hill 2 and F have been announced, I kind of wanted to... I don't know, I don't remember if they had a release date, but I do kind of want to do like a marathon of the Silent Hill games.
I think they're
for
all
when
releasing like across the next 5 years.
yeah. So yeah, I kind of want to have do a like quick run of all the main Silent Hill games. For when Silent Hill 2 remake and Silent Hill F and whatever the hell Townfall is comes out.
Yeah, so of all the Silent Hill stuff I'm seeing, like, I'm nervous about the 2 remake because, and I know I'm about to sound like some hardcore, like, Silent Hill 2 is one of the best horror games ever made, and like, I'm gonna sound like this is the same argument I have with Ocarina of Time, where it's like, it's good, and it leaves a lot of experimenting. Silent Hill 2 was a masterpiece in and of itself. It was a clunky masterpiece, and definitely a product of its time. So I'm not gonna say like it will forever be there. Yeah,
it's a masterpiece in spite of those things. Like
exactly.
The controls suck, and
but so did all.
I would say so. And we're going to talk about this also with Resident Evil and stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are going to say that, like, oh, they hate the voice acting. My problem isn't the voice acting because it's almost purposefully weird. And the same in Resident Evil, it's like purposefully cheesy.
Yeah, because that was supposed to be the point.
What I will say is the sound like quality and the mixing. That is like kind of like part of the reason why I don't want to play, why I'm tempted to see if I can make like a weird mod of Silent Hill 2 that has like just the gameplay of the original but the voice acting added in the HD remake or remaster. Is because I cannot stand the audio mixing.
Really?
The voice acting was great. It's just very uncomfortable. But not in an eerie way, in a way that enhances the gameplay, but in just a way that makes me not want to do it.
There's a reason for that, and I don't want to spoil it because without going too far into detail, none of these characters are supposed to be sane or normal. Like, there's a reason why they sound the way they do.
By the way, like I told you, I've watched things like Silent Hill 2 History of the Series a lot. Actually, if you cannot bring yourself to play Silent Hill because you do not like horror, I highly recommend this channel called Grand Gaming Channel. They have a playlist where they very painfully analyze all the Silent Hill games.
Okay. Do you mind linking that to me later?
Yeah.
Drop the thing in the description.
Let me send you the link. Here's the
while you do that, I'll also say in the description, I'll drop Jace's link, and as well as the link for the music you're hearing right now. If you like what you hear, check it out. It's on Spotify. It is DMCA free.
That and another very good creator. What's his name? I can't remember. Max Darrett. Max Darrett is another very talented creator who has these video essays explaining more like the beyond just explaining the games. It's more explaining the mythology around them and their different like inspirations. So, for example, I don't remember in what video it is, but he talks a lot about the direct inspirations that Stephen King in The Shining had on Silent Hill, and how he thinks like the presence of Young's Red Book can explain both Silent Hill and The Shining perfectly. It's an old video, I haven't watched in a while, but still, a very good content creator.
I'll have to check that out. That actually sounds interesting to me. If we were to talk about Silent Hill, I could do an entire documentary about just that game series by itself.
It is fantastic. Also, what I was going to say is, part of the reason why... So yeah, Silent Hill 2, I think it's... Part of the reason why I think remakes should always exist is because, particularly in games as old as Silent Hill 2, while yes, it was graphically impressive for the time, I think it can always be better, and it's like, it was very much strapped by technical limitations. Now, a lot of those technical limitations led to some amazing stuff, like the fog from Silent Hill. It was made because of technical limitations.
Yep, it was made so the game could load in the background while you're walking around.
Yeah, but the thing I figure is, like, just because a potential remake doesn't have that technical limitation anymore, doesn't mean it shouldn't be there. Like, Silent Hill 2, I don't remember if 2 has the fog the same way, but it's like, it can have, like, super detailed models and still have the fog. It doesn't need to not have the fog just because it can now load everything at once.
Yeah, the fog is just an ambient part. They actually didn't need the fog from Silent Hill 2 onward. They just kept it in there because it looked good.
Exactly. Like, things that characterize it that were added because of technical limitations, they can still be there. It's just going to look a lot nicer.
Yeah, it's just going to look nicer because it's loading farther. But also, that means on modern games, that's like, hey, FYI, modern game developers, if you want to make it so that your game doesn't wear and tear on the console by trying to load and render all these textures at once, put a fog in.
Exactly. Like, that's why I have some faith in Silent Hill 2 remake, because it's like, they kind of have to add things like the fog. Because even if it's unnecessary for technical reasons, it's still just such a vital part of the aesthetic and the identity of Silent Hill that how can you not have it in there?
Is it okay if I put a pin in the Silent Hill topic for now, just until we get to Silent Hill?
Absolutely.
That's the game. But because I do have one more game I want to bring up before we get to Resident Evil, just because I actually know this one, and it is it was an inspiration to Resident Evil. So, 1989, we are still on the Nintendo Entertainment System. There is a game called Sweet Home, which I believe was based on, it was either a movie or a TV show, like of the same title.
I think I was just watching a video on the Clock Tower games, and I think they mentioned Sweet Home.
Yeah, this came before, this inspired Clock Tower and also Resident Evil.
Yeah. I recognize the cover art now. So, I'm pretty sure it is based on like a movie that came out the same year.
So the concept of Sweet Home is these people are going into this house to investigate. I think it was either a crime that happened there a while back or like some incident happened there years ago. And so these people come to this home to try and like ready it for like a journalist, like a newsletter reel. And what they find there is evidence of like monsters and messed up human experiments, like characters die. It was the first game to do something like that, and it gets scoffed at because it's the NES. You can only be so scary with that and all those pixels, but it did one thing, and we brought this up with the other games, that would lead to what made, in my opinion, what makes this game scary. I don't know if it got localized.
I don't think it ever got localized, so more like for the Famicom. Famicom.
It would have been for the Famicom, yeah. But the idea was that all of the scares was not just in like, oh god, a monster is chasing me, I better run in this direction, because it's an 8 pixels, it's gonna look silly. However, text is never silly. All the text is like going into detail about like the different experiments. You can hear like, you can see like footsteps or like it's a human blank, and that is terrifying because you are no longer just stipulating off of the pixels in the game moving up, down, left, right. You're now stipulating off of information that the game is giving you, and your imagination takes it the rest of the way. And I think that is...
It goes with what I mentioned with... It also, like, relates to what I mentioned with, what was the name? With 3D Monster Maze, that having the text be so short is kind of, is very helpful. So one of the ideas that I've never actually believed is that, you know, for a horror movie to be scary, never show you a monster. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but it's more like, know when you should and when you should, more importantly, when you should not.
Right.
So I recently watched Alien, and, you know, that's not exactly a movie that was meant for, like, very big resolutions.
No, it took advantage of CRTV and the lower quality that they had.
Well,
A lot of movies did,
I don't think so, because like it was developed for the big screen for a projector. It's more like I think I don't know if Ridley Scott actually was thinking about.
It wasn't expecting contrast optimization.
Yeah, but what I mean is, I think the movie works just as well, because while you can see the alien very clearly in a lot of shots, the alien is always there so quickly, and is there just enough that you get an idea of what the alien is and how much of a threat it is, precisely, while still having that sense of tension. It's not just I think that we've defined. I think we've had this discussion before of horror and terror.
Yes, and the difference of horror and terror.
How, to me, the difference is mostly both present a threat, a direct threat to you. Not a direct threat, but a threat to you or to the protagonist or whatever.
I'm gonna Google it just to bring it up.
But to me, the question is, to me, horror is when that threat is a lot more existential, where just simply existing in the similar vicinity where that threat may or may not be in is enough to scare you, whereas terror is just, you're only scared if, oh my god, the monster is right there, it's going to kill me, ah!
So, here. Terror is the feeling of dread and apprehension at the possibility of something frightening, where horror is the shock and repulsion of seeing a frightening thing.
Sorry, you know how I would describe it? It's more like, the way I describe them is the difference between, say, The Shining and Friday the 13th.
Oh boy, Friday the 13th.
Or, in Friday the 13th, you're scared of Jason. You're scared of silly big man with hockey mask. But in The Shining, you don't even know what you're scared of. You just know you're scared because the hotel is scary. The threat is a lot more existential. Just existing in that hotel is scary enough. And with something like Alien, at least with the original, I think Aliens, the sequel, is terror because the aliens are a physical threat. But in the first one, the alien is a much more existential threat because it's already scary enough just being in the ship. You don't even, it's in the vents, you don't even know if it's going to ever come out of there, but you're already terrified. It doesn't matter. And anyway, so to me, that's partially how text can also create horror. Because if they go into too many details about what's happening, I think it just becomes terror, because you're being scared of something physical that's directly there. If they describe a person being killed, you're just scared of, you're just scared of the blood, you're just scared of the killer. But if they're vague about it, then it becomes horror. You don't know what exactly to be scared of.
The two of them feed into each other, and they can. Yeah. Which is actually a really good segue. Again, super hardcore fans, I'm going to mention Alone in the Dark very quickly, just because we cannot ignore the fact that it was the first 3D isometric title, and it also led to the inspiration of the game that we're... Or isometric, thank you.
No, I don't think it was isometric, was it?
Yeah, it was. It had the 3D isometric... It was the 3D isometric cameras. Like you would move down the hall, and the camera would change its position, depending on what part of the hall you were in.
That's not exactly isometric, though. Isometric is the angular perspective.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was.
Well, no, because it had a lot of different shots. Isometric is everything is in those rhombus-like squares.
It shot similarly to Resident Evil.
Yeah, but Resident Evil isn't isometric. So, here is the definition of isometric.
The fixed cameras.
Not the fixed cameras, but where the only lines that exist are in 30-degree angles or 90-degree angles. So, like this. The first is isometric. And so, a drawing like this...
I'll bring these up in the video. I should actually pin
like,
this.
drawings like that, those are isometric. The only lines that exist are in either 90-degree angles, like looking up and down, like vertical 90-degree angles, or in 30-degree angles. And the thing with... And by the way... a very good game that plays with isometric perspective, by the way, Monument Valley. It's a mobile game. Fantastic game.
I'll have to check it out. I don't really do a lot of mobile games.
I think it is on Steam, like it got ported. It's a really clever puzzle game that plays with isometric perspective.
Okay. Yeah, carrying on to the what I was segueing to before I stopped to give Alone in the Dark a brief mention. Sweet Home and Alone in the Dark both gave inspiration to the first big boom, per se, of survival horror, and that was Resident Evil in 1996.
I mean, I think there was so many things that helped Resident Evil.
Oh yeah, like, a lot of things paved the way.
Like, not just paved the way, but I mean, like, the reason why I think Resident Evil became so popular is just... Well, firstly, Alone in the Dark, which was, like, probably the best horror game pre-Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Alone in the Dark only came out on the MS-DOS. It only came out on the PC.
Right.
And while nowadays PCs are probably one of the most, like, broad ways in which people can play the games, you know?
PCs were a luxury back then. So were gaming consoles, but PCs even more so.
Yeah, because like, a PC that would be capable of playing games, particularly a game with 3D graphics as impressive as Alone in the Dark did back in the day, was pretty difficult. And I think it's mostly... Like, I think it's mostly not so much that they were a luxury, although not that it wasn't, but that we didn't have, as a culture, this idea of PC gaming in mind. You know, like, PCs were still only viewed as computers were still only viewed as, like, a professional thing.
Like, the game that I played on a PC at the same time Resident Evil coming out in 1996, let me see. In that time frame, I probably would have... No, let's see, I would have been 2 years old. 2 years later, in 1999, I would have been playing, like, the Winnie the Pooh educational games. Roger, like Reading Rabbit.
Like, the most famous... like, the things that PCs were known for in terms of gaming was either business for dad, or, hey dad, can I play this Winnie the Pooh game on your personal computer?
Yeah, can I play this game where I do the numbers? And then they're like, sure, because this game is actually giving you something of an education.
Yeah, meanwhile, Big Brother is out there killing prostitutes in GTA 1 on his PlayStation.
Yeah, meanwhile, Big Brother is learning, hey, if you kill them,
you have to pay them. Yeah.
You can get your money.
But anyways, like, yeah. The thing is, I think the thing that made PCs really a understandable idea for gaming was more than Doom, Wake.
Yes.
I remember this video I watched a long time ago, which was about the evolution of graphics. And they said that Quake was actually the first game released for PC that required you to have a dedicated graphics card.
Yep, it was. That became the run. Before the running gag of "Can I run Doom on this?" It was "Can I run Quake on this?"
Rather, does it run Crisis?
Does it run Crisis? Oh, God.
I know.
But
Crisis wasn't a video game. It was a pyramid scheme to get you to buy more Nvidia cards.
More Nvidia cards. Very true. Pulling back. Sorry that I keep having to like rein in to the.
Yeah, no.
We'll be talking all day. But I bring up Resident Evil because it was a culmination of terror and horror in the same aspect. Because the first thing you're introduced to is an action cutscene. Yeah, everything is action. Michael Bay's. Like it looks cheesy. It was meant to be cheesy.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of inspirations of the game. I think the biggest one has to be not Dawn of the Dead. What was the third one?
Oh, the Rising Dead.
No, like it's the third one in the. It's Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead.
Day of the Dead.
Ash versus the Evil Dead.
No, not the Evil Dead ones. The George A. Romero zombie movies.
Oh, crud. It was Night of the Living Dead. Day of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, I think was the third one.
Yeah, it's either Day or Dawn of the Dead. I don't remember.
One of those two. But what Resident Evil did was the first few cutscenes are you're in a scary house.
Yeah, Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead.
It was Day of the Dead. You're in a house. You don't know what's happening here. All you know is some scary dogs chase you out there. If you try to leave, one of them gets in and it scares you into the house, and then the character's like, "Yeah, no, I'm not opening that door again."
But yeah, it's just so for a start, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead had just come out like 6 years earlier, 7 years earlier. No, 10 years earlier.
Yeah, 1986.
Well, zombies pretty much had already had their like big surge and going back down.
Mm-hmm.
Save for video games. I don't think there were very many zombie games at the time.
Probably Ghouls and Ghosts or Castlevania.
Yeah. Well, Castlevania. I don't remember it having zombies.
Yeah, there were undead in Castlevania games. And Altered Beast for the Genesis.
That one I don't know.
So Altered Beast actually had a really interesting premise, but that's not horror related.
Anyway, so for a start, I'm pretty sure like zombies were just making like their first comeback in popular culture. Like in the same way that zombies just got like because of Walking Dead and stuff, zombies just got like super saturated in media.
They became tropey.
Yeah, like I think that zombies have like this very long history of just someone comes out and does something pretty new with the zombie genre, then it becomes tropey. It dies for a few years, then someone comes back again, and it becomes the huge fad it was again.
Just like the zombies themselves, it will never die.
Yeah, exactly. And anyways, so that's part of it, but also the fact that, again, horror games were either on the NES, which like wasn't very capable of showcasing horror, or on the PC, which still wasn't really viewed as a gaming machine. And the PlayStation really was very much like the first console that was capable of outputting graphics and audio and such things
at a PC level.
At a near PC level, while still being not cheap, but cheaper than a PC. Like it just the regular price of a console, and two, being very accessible.
I remember the original PlayStation, you could find somewhere between $100 to $150. Some going up to $250, depending on which one you got. Because they also had the PlayStation, but then they also had the PlayStation DualShock.
Yeah.
Because of the different control style, and sometimes that DualShock controller was required. Resident Evil was one of those games.
Yeah. But yeah, like the reason why pretty much like Resident Evil just practically made the horror genre what it is, the PlayStation, I think, has to do with just how accessible the PlayStation was at the time.
Right. It introduced survival. Well, and here's the interesting thing. At that point, horror was still classified as a subgenre.
Yeah.
So what I find interesting is, by technicality, horror didn't become a main gaming genre until 1992 with Alone in the Dark, but even then it wasn't a mainstream genre. And even with Resident Evil coming out with survival horror, that was still classified as an action game.
Yeah. I'd say it was Silent Hill that made it a genre in and of itself.
Same thing. Silent Hill, by the ESRB, if I remember this correctly, Silent Hill, when it came out in 1999, I want to say? 2000? 99, 2000-ish?
99.
It was 99.
99, yeah.
When it came out, it was classified as a dark, mature fantasy game. It did not... It had horror, like, as subgenre, but it was sold as a fantasy game. Which actually does technically make sense, considering the different religious themes of it, and the themes of, like, witchcraft and spells, demons and magic. It does, by technicality, fall under the fantasy genre.
I think it is undeniable that it is fantasy.
Yeah.
I think it was on a review of The Predator, the 2018 movie, that no one talks about because they shouldn't talk about it.
No.
Someone said, like, horror is one of, if not the most, like, moldable genre there can be. Because, like, you can combine it with almost any other genre. You want horror and sci-fi, you got Alien. You want horror and a military movie, you got Predator. You want horror and fantasy, you got, like, some scenes from Lord of the Rings or whatever.
You want horror and action, here's Godzilla.
You want horror and action, is Godzilla. Or, you know, whatever zombie movie or whatever. Horror is a genre that can be combined with almost anything, except for comedy.
No, there's horror comedy.
That's
what Elvira is.
Well, I'd say that just comedies with some horror elements, because horror and comedy, I think, are like
Shaun of the Dead, Vampires Suck, Scary Movie,
I wouldn't
1, 2, and 3.
Okay, one, I've only ever cared about the thing. It's the only good one.
Dude, you're cutting out a bit.
Okay, so firstly, Scary Movie 3 is the only good one of the series. It is! It's the one with Leslie Nielsen.
I know, but for me, Scary Movie will always be one of two
It
things.
is.
It will be the parrot that's just going to Polly want a cracker? Polly want your sweet mama's ass. And the what's up thing. That's what I'll forever know Scary Movie for. But pulling back in the reins, the reason I bring up Resident Evil, both for where it succeeds for me. Sorry.
No, it's just I disconnected by accident. My internet went creepy. What were you talking about?
I was saying how Scary Movie, to me, will always be one of two things, and it's the parrot that wants your sweet mama's ass, or the what's up from, I think that was the first one. The stoner in his face.
To me, it was mostly because I had just watched Airplane, and it was actually written by. I love Airplane. What are you talking about? It's a hilarious
wait,
movie.
Wait, what's the one that I'm thinking of? There was a really bad airport. But we're getting super derailed though.
Yeah, but wait, Zeshi, surely you must be joking.
No, I thought of a wrong movie.
Are you just gonna ignore the setup? Come on.
Surely you must be joking. I'm not. No, my brain like blanked for a second.
I'm not. And don't call me Shirley.
I'm not, and don't call.
Have you never heard that joke?
I've said that all the time. I'm not, and don't call me Shirley. But I want to pull us back into Resident Evil, and personally, what I found terrifying about it, as someone who has played it, it's not the visual. On one hand, you have the grotesque visuals of the zombies eating things, and the horror of this, and God knows what else in this house. But to me, that's the terror. Is if there are zombies here, what else is here? What else did these people do? And that is...
It's a lot more terror than it is horror.
Eh?
I would say that Resident Evil, at least one, is a lot more terror. For the most part.
But that is fueled also by the horror of something as subtle as journal entries and cassette recordings.
Absolutely. The environmental storytelling of RE1 was absolutely what made it like any good to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Saved it. Yes, fantastic stuff.
It's well, and that I to this day I will always like feel a chill up my spine at the journal entry of the guy who's like first degrading the T-virus, and you hear like the scientific process, and then the final page just ends on itchy, itchy, itchy dog yum. And
yeah, it was like so hungry or something like that.
Like that freaked me out, but that's good.
Like the environmental storytelling of that game is
like
absolutely fantastic.
Is
nothing short of fantastic.
And Silent Hill actually does something very similar, not by dialogue or text, but by the environment. And what you, as the player, just kind of have to read in between the lines.
Yeah. I mean, another part is how it kind of combined like these subgenres of horror. Like it was a zombie movie, but it was also like a haunted house movie. You know,
it was a monster house, and then you have the tragedy of the family that lived in that mansion and what Umbrella Corporation did to them, and it led to something that was incredibly unique for a game, something that had never been done in movies before, but never in a game, and it makes a pitiable antagonist, which is very difficult to do.
What antagonist do you mean?
So when I say pitiable antagonist, I'm not talking about Wesker. I'm talking about the little girl.
Yeah, Lisa Trevor.
Lisa Trevor.
But wasn't Lisa Trevor like just in the remake, the GameCube one?
No, she was in the original game. She was the original.
She only a monster in.
She's only a monster. Well, no. So you could find like the files on what happened to her, but in the remake they went back and they added a little bit more, just based on what had already existed. But she was always the endgame boss.
I can't find any pictures of her from the PS1 game.
Because she's just nondescribed monster. In that one, I think. She is just the final monster. Did they change that? Because I'm thinking about Resident Evil like the director's cut.
Maybe it wasn't mentioned like... Okay, let me see.
I could have sworn that she wasn't the original. If I'm
right, no, that's from the movie. Nemesis fandom.
Yeah, that's gonna take a bit. While you go into that, I'm gonna move on to the Silent Hill nerding, to me,
Okay. Oh, so the thing I wanted to say quickly though, um, real quick
before we jump consoles,
about the remake that's coming out. Part of the thing that excites me is because I don't know this for sure. I have a very big suspicion that with not Resident Evil, with Silent Hill 2 remake, they're going to pull like a Final Fantasy VII remake and have it be very different story-wise. You know, like I have no real reason. I don't know, but not very different, but like have that like variation because I think Silent Hill is like the one other series that you can actually do this with and do it well because of the weird fantastical elements.
if that is the case, I would rather they start with a full-on reboot and maybe not call it Silent Hill 2, because well, I guess they did start with Resident Evil 2. They kind of skipped over Resident Evil 1 in the remakes.
Well, because it already had it.
It had the HD remastering and then another HD like air
No,
quote.
I mean Resident Evil 1 was already remade for the GameCube.
Sort of. It was updated graphically, but it was more or less the same exact game. I'm talking about with like RE2 and how it got like a full like overhaul from the bottom up using the RE4 engine.
Yeah.
Which is another thing I want to touch on. But if we're going into the horror stuff, I'm gonna take Silent Hill, and I'm actually gonna hop to another game that made horror very popular. But unfortunately, due to poor localization, it didn't sell well outside of Japan and Europe. And that was Project Zero. Or as we know it in the US, Fatal Frame.
I don't know much about... I know nothing about Fatal Frame, other than it was a Wii U exclusive once. And that's it.
No, Fatal Frame goes all the way back to the It was one of the first games on the PS2.
So yeah, I beg you to please enlighten me.
So the whole the concept of Project Zero.
So actually, can we pause for a second? I need to go do something.
You're fine. Just let me know.
Go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I'll take a short intermission and talk with Chad about Silent Hill then.
Okay, please do.
Resident Evil.
Thank you.
While you do that, so my aspect on Resident Evil as a survival horror and the influence it had definitely goes to the journal entries, and my catering to Silent Hill. When it comes to like the fantasy aspect, what I found very interesting playing through it was its incredibly religious themes, and I remember watching the Silent Hill movies. Because I had only played Silent Hill 2. I had not played 1 and 3. So I was shocked to see these like super super Catholic imagery in particular. And the reasoning behind that was because the religious cults of Silent Hill were almost they were compared frequently to Catholicism as a religion in the first game, and it wasn't until the second and third game that, hey, the cult's not just like a Catholic influence, it is an omni-religious influence, and the story behind that is just phenomenal, and the way they handled it is very well done. I know I mentioned this in the Silent Hill 3 video. If you want to check it out, as long as you're on my YouTube, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and just check out my other way, check out my YouTube videos. It's probably somewhere like down there somewhere. I think you can find my link like down there, I think. Yes. Okay. Waiting for Jace to get back for talk of Fatal Frame. Well, I want to figure out why I'm gonna check something really quick because there's something I want to know. In terms of Resident Evil's localization. Biohazard. Why was Biohazard renamed Resident Evil? the game originally called Biohazard in Japan. However, it was decided to have a name change after Chris Kamer, director of productions at Capcom, pointed out that it would be impossible to trademark Biohazard in the United States. Huh. I wonder why. I googled one thing before I dive into Fatal Frame. I was wondering why Biohazard got renamed Resident Evil when it released, and it was because Capcom USA president at the time had convinced the Capcom president in Japan that they wouldn't be able to localize the name Biohazard in America, so it got renamed Resident Evil.
What?
Which I find that weird because Biohazard makes more sense as a title.
I disagree with that. Because it is a residence, you're dealing with the Resident Evil. It's a bit of a pun. No, I'm serious. That's the pun.
Like, I know, but oh, that hurts. But Biohazard makes more of a sense because it's biomutations and the concept of biomutant weaponry.
I will say this. I think Bio makes more sense for literally every other game in the series, save for
the first one.
Save for 1, 7, because of course, and
reboot.
Save for 1, 7, and actually maybe 8, because I think that the Resident Evil pun also works for like the residents of a village.
So I've never played 7 and 8. I still have to do that.
You should play them. I think they're great. I haven't played them.
I'll have to do that another time. But you wanted enlightenment on Fatal Frame.
Yes.
So the concept of I'm gonna call it Project Zero, because the proper name of it. But again, I find it interesting that it was called Project Zero. Fatal Frame in this case makes more sense to me because the concept is, you first play as a young man who is learning how to be a writer, and he's going to a mansion where his favorite author lives to ask him questions. But when he goes there, they find, like, that all these, like, horrible deaths and stuff happen in this house, and nobody can find the author. So he arrives with an item known as the Camera Obscura. And it is a... This isn't touched on as much in the first game as it is in the second game onward. It is actually a cursed camera. This is a camera made with dark and evil magic, and its design is to capture and exorcise spirits and forcibly put them to rest. So the premise of the original Project Zero is after the older brother disappears, he becomes entranced by the spirit of a maiden who died for a man she loved in that mansion. By the way, the real like horror of Fatal Frame I'll touch on in a second. For the rest of the game, you play as his younger sister, and you have to exorcise all of the spirits that have suffered incredibly violent deaths in this household, which there were a lot. The actual horror of Fatal Frame is that every incident in the game was pulled from a real-life, like, brutal murder or massacre or haunting that all actually happened. Like, the mansion in the game is based on an actual haunting site in Japan in the real world.
Okay, that sounds actually pretty interesting.
It's actually really, like, fascinating. Like, I know you hear the joking, like, inspired by true events, paranormal activity. No, this one was actually based on historical things that happened horribly. And the main
what movie is it? The Strangers, that is I think it is The Strangers. It's that movie about like house invaders, and it's like inspired by true events. The writer got scared by someone knocking on his door once.
Yeah, the writer is just like, no. But the big haunting of Fatal Frame was that a woman fell in love with a samurai, and the family wanted her to marry somebody else, but she had completely fallen in love with the samurai, and the samurai fell in love with her. So because she had been deemed unpure to the family, she was unable to wed, and so she was to be drawn and quartered. Which, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it literally means you are tied to 4 horses and they all go off in different directions. You are literally pulled to death. It's quite horrible. And the samurai found out, saw the incident through a window, bust into the mansion, and slaughtered the entire family.
Honestly, at this point, I think he's very justified.
And then committed seppuku.
Oh, wait, did he manage to save the girl, or did he see her?
He watched her die and went mad.
Why didn't you do anything earlier?
He was too late. He arrived just as it happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, because the way you described it made me think like he was just there watching.
I should clarify that this love story happened through a window. I forget what the reasoning was, but this woman was not allowed to interact with the outside world. Like, she was literally just born and raised in one room to eventually be a prize bride to somebody for social standing. Okay. Which, in the time frame of this happening in the real world, is believable and sadly quite common. This was a very common practice for people of higher standing.
Yeah.
And so the incident wasn't considered... It was considered a horrific event in history, but what led to this being a haunting in the real world was anytime someone broke in to investigate or, like, snuck in, they would find, like, people dying in this mansion. Like, something was killing these people, and no one could figure out what. So the grounds were deemed haunted, and even... I think eventually someone did a proper, like, spiritual cleansing of the place, and then it became a tourist site. But between, like, the then and the there, a lot of the things you see about, like, journalists dying in there are because journalists actually died in there, trying to investigate the history, and then it's believed they encountered the spirit of the samurai who is still enraged and killing anyone who walks into the house.
Well, I find the idea of, like... Because I'm very much not a believer in haunting stuff.
Oh, I am.
Haunted stuff.
Big time.
I am very much not one. And, I like to think that, what's happening is just, it was actually one guy that was just getting there, like a serial killer doing it because he was sick. And, once he, got to... Once the, like, priest came in and de-haunted the place...
He just bailed. No,
he was just like, well, now I don't have a cover.
I think what had happened...
Now I can't pin it on the ghosts!
I think what happened in actuality was, because no one had been inside of the house, the floorboards were rotting and people were, like, walking upstairs. And so, like, people would fall through the floor and land on cemented ground. I think was, like, the real
that
reasoning.
would make sense.
But that's not as scary.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
That's not as scary as a samurai ghost killing everybody. But I bring all of this up, like, this has an amazing storyline. However, due to poor localization, it only got 1 or 2 prints in the US. It did not sell well in Europe. It only sold fantastically in Japan. Which is why, in the same year of 2001, afterward, Silent Hill 2 would release, and that would be the very first game to introduce horror as a mainstream genre to console gaming.
Yeah.
Like,
one thing interesting that we should touch on, I don't know at what point, is how probably the biggest horror games that, like, you know, that ever happened, and now it's funny that Japanese folklore has some of the most incredible horror things out there.
They have such a unique perspective on horror, and that's why it hits so differently. Like, I'm not gonna lie,
Well,
I think Japanese horror scares me more than anything else.
yeah, but the most popular horror games made by Japanese studios are very Western based.
I know. I was just like, how do I say that? Like, do we bring this up with Parasite Eve, Resident Evil, Silent Hill? Silent Hill was actually. I was talking about this while you were at the bathroom. Silent Hill was inspired by a mix of Western films and Western religions. Like the main
like I
religion of the
remember.
first game is Catholicism.
Yeah, I remember it was talking about the Silent Hill movie and how the director was like gloating basically about how he actually understands that, you know, in the movie they pretty much paint the evil and lesser as the devil, right? Like especially in the movie, but like it's not really that. It's more like the Japanese concept of a doppelganger, and there was this and there was this interview of the director saying, like, part of the reason why, like, I completely understand that it's closer to the Japanese concept of a doppelganger than it is the devil, but like, what? But like, I had to find a way to explain it to the child actor.
How do you translate?
And not just how do you translate that, but it's like, how do I explain that to the little kid that's playing her?
Look, mommy, I'm burning. It's like, ah!
Yeah, exactly, and it's like,
She did such a good job.
Yeah, and it's just like, so I just told the kid, you're playing the devil.
Yeah, that I guess.
And by the way, apparently, and the director did say it, like the kid was so excited, like,
I get to be Satan! Yay! Oh
yeah, it was.
God. Everyone
But
loves being
apparently,
the bad guy.
well, yeah, apparently the director, who is also going to be doing the film adaptation of Silent Hill 2. Like, I think it's pretty much confirmed at this point. Yeah, it's pretty much confirmed at this point that the movie that he's going to be directing, the new Silent Hill movie that he wants to direct, is going to be based on Silent Hill 2.
I am cautiously optimistic.
I think it's one of the few ones that... I think Silent Hill is one of the few games that can very well work as a movie in terms of adaptation.
Oh yeah.
Like, because think of the video game movies that have been actually good, like Sonic and Detective Pikachu are like the only two ones. And they're not I mean, what other one has been actually good?
Tron? I actually like
It's
Tron.
But it's not a video game movie. It's a movie about video games, but it's not one based on a video game, right? Or am I...
Tron was a video game. It was a video game first, and then it was a movie.
Seriously, I did not know that.
I thought it was. I could be wrong. But
I'm gonna look that up right now.
But if we're talking about Silent Hill 2, I wanted to bring up what made that particular game so... The reason I feel like Silent Hill 2 became so famous for introducing the horror genre to the mainstream is because it didn't rely on zombies, it didn't rely on vampires, it didn't rely on, like, a known monster, and the real horror... I'm assuming are you planning on playing Silent Hill 2, or do you care if I, like, deep dive and complete spoiler the story? Because this is actually...
Yes and yes. Yes and no. I do plan on playing it, but I already know the story. So
okay.
Don't worry about it.
So, the whole thing about Silent Hill 2 is Jace...
Spoil away.
Okay, so... yes, let me spoil away a game that's 20 years old now. Spoiler warning.
Yes.
But the thing that made this such a big deal as a horror game is it's not zombies, and yeah, you're fighting monsters, but the real horror is...
Or the friends we made along the way. I'm sorry.
Actually, yes. In this case, actually, yes. Because it's...
Because you told me how you were very concerned about
playing it.
the fact that you didn't see Eddie, or what was her name? The
Eddie and
woman.
Angela.
Yeah, you told me when I first told you, yo, they're making a Silent Hill 2.
I'm like,
You said
Eddie?
you were concerned that you didn't see Eddie.
Eddie and Angela both, because so I bring this. We talked about like how weird the voice acting sounds earlier. The fact is, none of the characters in Silent Hill are sane, and the genuine factor of fear is not that we know monsters are coming. I
will say, from voice acting. Oh shit. Okay. Eddie's voice acting is not just like appropriately creepy. It's actually good. Like not in a.
His is the best in the game by far.
Yeah, like it's actually good, unironically and without being because of the thematic. Oh, it's meant to be eerie and weird. No, it's like just good.
It's well done, and Liam O'Brien does a good job too in the remake. But I honestly...
Well, the HD remaster, rather.
Yeah, HD remaster.
The fact that we have to differentiate it is so stupid.
This is actually... And oh boy, have I got stories about that remastering that just drive me up the wall. But
yeah, I know.
The thing that makes this such a big deal is the fear is we don't know what is happening in our player character's head. We look at our protagonist the same way we look at a static television. We don't see what they're thinking, we don't know what they're doing, and it makes it a difficult play to relate to, which is beyond daring for a game of its time. Usually you'd get the mute protagonist so that the player could...
either a mute protagonist or a protagonist that's just a chatterbox.
Yeah, that you could relate to. And then you have James, who... The first thing you're introduced to is him, like... staring at himself in a mirror and wiping his face, and it's just like having this mind-numbing experience.
It is an amazing animation for the time.
Oh yeah, that for 2001 that was an absolutely phenomenal. The PS2 revolutionized horror and just revolutionized gaming.
Absolutely.
And it's to this day it's still like the most
by the way,
sold console.
I really like it. So fun fact, do you know how that was made? Because it was actually a very difficult animation to make. By that point in time, motion capture was kind of a thing, and in fact, the body animations were made using motion capture.
Didn't they like semi-rotoscope it?
The main animator, I don't remember his name though. The main animator actually stood in front of a mirror and took pictures of himself going through each and every facial expression that James would go to, so he could frame by frame recreate it. He even had to put a mirror in his office so that he could do it.
So he could do it just to look at himself. That's so cool though. And the facial expressions, even when you get away from that cutscene, the characters are expressive at the right times, and they're unexpressive or lacking an expression at the right times as well. So I mentioned James having his mental lapse, which he's coming to Silent Hill to find, because he got a letter from his dead wife that had died in a hospital weeks ago. And this is what's interesting about this is for the player to know. James is thoroughly convinced that his wife had died weeks ago in a hospital.
Yeah.
Only to later find
3 years ago.
Huh?
James thought that his wife had died 3 years ago.
Years ago? I thought it was...
No, because the thing was that the little girl, Lucy, was it?
Oh, that, Laura.
Laura, yeah. She had she had her birthday 3 weeks ago, and she said like, "Oh, I haven't seen her, Mary in 3 weeks. I don't know where she is."
And he's like, wait, Mary's been dead for years. Yeah, okay, yeah. He was convinced that Mary had been dead for years because of a disease.
Also, I found this picture. You're gonna like it.
I will check it out when we're. Well, here, I'll check it out super quick. Okay, that's just silly.
It's like the this Max Barrett guy that I linked you to. It's his thumbnail on. Holy shit! It got announced.
But the spoiler for James's story is he is having a mental lapse over the fact that, there's actually a really creepy fun fact I want to share with this. He's having a mental lapse over the fact that not only did he kill Mary, but if someone moved the free camera in the Silent Hill editing, if you pay really careful attention, you can find Mary's body bag in the back of his car.
Yeah, I heard that. That it's actually in the back seat.
They put it in the game.
Yeah, so, reminds me of in PT, the fact that the weird ghost lady is always behind the player.
Oh, in PT.
Yeah, in PT.
Yeah, I thought you said ET, and I was like, wait, ET phone home? What? Ghost? ET, fuck you.
That would have been a very fun game. That would have been a better game.
Oh no, ET is a horrible game.
No, I mean like an ET horror game.
ET horror game. ET, take home. But no, so this particular game, and the reason why it got such high critical acclaim, equal to everyone saying every Zelda game that comes out will never be as good as Ocarina of Time. I'll touch that subject later. Silent Hill 2 was definitely a product of its time and a masterpiece, not just by graphic quality, but by storytelling. There was never a game that dove into psychological horror like this.
Not just that dove into psychological horror that way. How do I put this?
Not
just that dove into psychological horror, but the way that it deals with things. For example, the way you get the different endings is not just by active decisions you make. Yeah. Not just by save this character, but by how you treat James or how you treat Maria in gameplay.
Yeah, if you leave James on low health for the majority of the game, you'll probably get the in-canon ending, which is the in-water ending. Which also...
Wait, that's a canon ending?
So, yeah, the game has 2 canonical endings. And when I say what they are side by side, it'll make sense.
So, it's the one where he decides
to drown himself.
To take a nice ride on his car to the bottom of the lake.
Yep.
And the other one is what?
The rebirth ending.
The one where he tries to
bring Mary back.
To resurrect Mary.
So, and here's why. This is actually really fascinating. Before I dive into the other 2 characters, I want to share this.
So it's canon because instead of using the rowboat, he tried to go in car.
No. So, this is something that would not be done until other games much later, but the whole point of Silent Hill was to encourage you to play a second time, and they never really went into why, but they were said, if you're gonna play this, play it twice. If you're gonna play this, play it twice, and they made sure that was known. The reason for this
that's not usually something I like. Silent Hill 2 is one of the few games that does it right, and Nier Automata.
Oh yeah. Well, Nier, you have to play all 4 times to get the...
And even then it's not... But more like Replicant, but yeah.
Oh boy, I'm gonna have fun playing Gestalt. So...
the whole... So you're gonna... Wait, so you're gonna play Gestalt or the...
Gestalt. I'm not touching Replicant.
Why not?
Because Gestalt is what Yoko Taro wanted it to be.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He was upset that he was told by Square Enix that he had to make a pretty boy protagonist.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wanted the protagonist to be a fatherly old man. But so the reasoning for this is when you start Silent Hill 2, you're kind of having this weird moment of why is James looking at himself in the mirror? Why is he freaking out? Why is he
he's not that handsome, come on.
He's not that handsome. But there is an implication immediately off the bat that every first-time player is guaranteed to miss. And it's because that James has done this before. So Silent Hill 2 is James's purgatory for his decision to kill Mary. The idea is, so this is gonna be like lore busting right up your alley. But there's a reason for this. So he has the punishment of going through with everything that happened, having to deal with Pyramid Head, who is a monster he created, and oh boy, is there a lot of lore to touch there.
I mean, I get a lot of the implications, and like, I get that like Silent Hill is
it is a
broadly speaking. Silent Hill is broadly speaking like a purgatory in and of itself, but
so
I never, save for like PT, I never got the vibe in any game, or at least from what I understand. Again, I haven't played it. I've only watched like very selective like this game explained videos on it. But from what little I understand, it's a lot more of like, it's not like one of those reiterative purgatories, or at least that's not how I ever understood it. Save for like PT, where you literally reiterate the same room over and over again.
So the reasoning behind this is James has such a strong emotional instance that when he approaches Silent Hill, his emotional stimuli is on par with Alessa Gillespie burning in the house. Like, he is at the same mental and physical manifestation as that. So, unlike Alessa, who has Silent Hill as like her essentially holy sacred ground for the magics that are being done and how it became her world, when James arrived there, it became his, because he was that much closer to the feelings of wrath and anger and regret.
Okay, that I guess I kind of understand. I know, I don't like the idea, and this is just me. I'm very much not a fan of the reiterative purgatory kind of idea, you know? I don't know why. It's not something I've ever liked. I like the idea of something being I like the idea of something being purgatory. And like, you know, like Silent Hill is almost unambiguously meant to be a form of purgatory.
In two,
to a certain extent in 4.
And there's a reason for that. like I'm actually getting to I'm actually bouncing into
the I don't know if you know this. Speaking of 4, something I only read about now, the landlord in 4, of the building that Henry lives in is apparently James's father.
Yep, and that's important.
And that's like pretty cool. Anyways,
so again, there's reasoning for all of this. So when James arrives there, the like sacred ground of Silent Hill turns into his mental scape, and the proof of this is in a single being alone. If you pay very close attention, he looks at a Pyramid Head doesn't exist in the game until he sees a painting of something depicted as the Executioner. However, if you look carefully at the painting, the Pyramid Head in there has a white head. These are the Executioners that exist in Alessa Gillespie's nightmares. And that's why every Pyramid Head onward technically can't exist because they are the executioners depicted by that rite. And James was able to manifest his own version of that executioner. And that became the Red
Pyramid Head in... Because the Pyramid Heads on the other games, like, aren't... have very notable differences from the one that belongs to James.
Yep. But that also is supposed to depict, like, he needed to be punished for what he did. Like, his own mind was saying he needed to be punished for what he did so badly that he manifested something that powerful out of his own imagination.
That I absolutely agree with. Like, I think it's practically, like, just to the point of it just being canon. Because, like, yeah, the idea in Silent Hill 2 is that the three characters, like Eddie, Angela, and James, they each see a different form of Silent Hill. They each see their own monsters. They each see their own world. Like, there's
James
a reason
is
why.
the only one who can see all three.
Yeah, and even then, not all the time. James only sees the fridge when he's about to kill Eddie. James only sees the weird fleshy room when he's there to help Angela and kill Abstract Daddy.
And then he only sees her Silent Hill when she accepts what's coming. Like, Angela is just a tragic character, and the only thing that the three of them share in common and why they can see each other's Silent Hills is the guilt and the need to be punished. Like, they feel
she's a very tragic character, but oddly, she's like the only character that gets to have an ending that could be happy.
And then she just chooses not to take it.
No, because like she just leaves frame and you don't ever see her again.
Oh no,
she doesn't.
No. She walks to her own death.
But I always understood like she just goes up those stairs and you don't see her again, and it's kind of ambiguous.
It's heavily implied. And
it's implied, yeah, but like I prefer to think that she maybe went through her own adventure, and I don't know, but like she's the only one that gets to have a chance at a happy ending, whereas James. Eddie just doesn't get the chance because he never felt any regret about what he did. And James, like, the best ending James can have is still him realizing, I'm a horrible person and I killed my wife. And I'm never going to be happy.
To quick explain Angela's ending and why it ends in tragedy, what happens is, as she walks away, the fires rise behind her and the building actually collapses. But the last thing you see of her is her kind of just like standing she's actually T-posed. Her model's actually T-posed at the top of the stairs. It's kind of funny. But the implication...
So it is absolutely a happy ending. T-posing is absolutely a happy ending.
No, what happens is that she accepts that she has done horrible things and doesn't deserve to continue living for what she did. And so, in her Silent Hill, she burns and the building collapses on her. Like, that's it. That is the last time you see her, and she dies.
I don't know. I do think that it was left... I agree that she didn't deserve to have, but that's why I think it was left pretty ambiguous. And like, that's absolutely a possibility, and probably what was intended, but no, yeah, I do believe it was ambiguous enough that she's the only one that could have a possibly happy ending. Because I think that Silent Hill doesn't... Okay, so this is more of a theory than anything, but it's kind of like what I like to think. Silent Hill doesn't attract anyone. It doesn't attract bad people or like people who sinned, quote unquote. It only attracts people based on their guilt. And this is something I would really like to see explored, where it's like Eddie, in spite of everything, felt some level of guilt on what he did, at least at the beginning.
He knows what he did was wrong.
Yeah, and like it was only until the very end of his story that he very much was like, so what? Maybe it's not wrong that I did this. It was only until like that very end.
I consider him a tragic character in a different way, and it's because of what
So
he
do I.
represents. He represents someone who is unintelligent, unattractive, and is bullied his entire life, and is bullied into becoming something they couldn't handle.
I kind of agree. To me, it's... So how do I put this? To me, it's the idea that... So the thing that I find... I don't remember, did Eddie actually defend himself when he first killed, or was it just killing?
It was just killing.
Because
he was bullied and bullied and bullied, and then he got his father's gun, found the bully, and shot him.
Oh yeah, but that was revenge.
That was revenge. He was bullied until he couldn't take it anymore.
But, like, what I mean is something that I find very different. I think that I find very different between both Eddie / Angela and James is that first, Angela I don't think did really anything wrong. She was really just defending herself against her abusers. And Eddie, while it was revenge, like, I don't find it hard to believe that he felt like that the bullying was so bad that he genuinely felt he had no other recourse.
Right. He was done. And...
Yeah, like I genuinely do believe that the bullying that he received was so bad that, you know, regardless of whether what he did was right or wrong, which it was wrong, he genuinely did not feel there was any other way out of it.
Well, and part of the reason you see Eddie change is you see James starting to act with against James in disregard and treat him the way a bully would.
Yeah, which
and
is...
that's where Eddie starts to be different with him.
Yeah, I mean, James never got to be so mean, but it was like, he was a little, I don't know, I guess, negligent, but he just wasn't nice, exactly.
You're just, a little girl's out there and you're just sitting here eating pizza? Forget you fat lazy bum.
I did not remember that second line, I only remembered the first one.
Yeah, well, I don't think he says forget you lazy bum, but he does say, like, forget you, and then just walks away. Like, he leaves Eddie to die, because, well, and to be fair, Eddie just sees a little girl walk out there.
Fair enough, I guess. Like, yeah, like, I'm not saying that James treated him well, but it's like, the fact that he didn't treat him that well, and Laura was also very mean to him.
Laura called him fatso and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, Laura's actually kind of a little shit.
But she's also the only one that doesn't have any monsters.
Yeah, because she's a kid. She hasn't done anything bad that she could feel guilt about. And anyway, that's what I'm getting to. What I was getting to is
section just on Silent Hill 2.
Yeah. I feel like Silent Hill doesn't attract quote-unquote sinners.
Yeah.
But rather it attracts those who feel guilt to some extent about their sin.
Yeah, for Laura, she feels guilty that she got to live.
And even then, like, she doesn't know. No, because Laura didn't think that. No, Laura didn't think that Mary was alive. Was dead. She thought that Mary was alive.
Oh no! The whole reason she was there was to find Mary.
Yeah, but it's because like.
Any of this.
Yeah, but it's like, what do you mean Mary died? She's totally fine. What are you talking about? She just got discharged or whatever.
Like
that's. And it's like. Just James is like, Well, I know that didn't happen. I'm pretty sure of it. I made it.
I was like, I'm pretty sure that. Well, and he himself doesn't accept that. So this just
Yeah, he himself doesn't accept it. But it's like James feels the guilt for killing Mary and had this sort of mental breakdown that made him forget that he did it in the first place. Eddie feels some level of guilt for killing his bully, but in the end he ends up deciding that, you know what, fuck it. And Angela, in spite of being like unequivocally justified in what she did, at least in my opinion,
feels guilt all the way to the end.
Still feels guilt. So that's like an idea that I really hope that Downfall or
the Silent Hill 2 remake.
or maybe the remake or maybe F can deal with this idea that it's not that Silent Hill attracts quote-unquote sinners, it's that Silent Hill attracts people who feel guilt
for things they've done. And
things they've done. I would really like to see like an absolute psychopath.
I can touch him. I was just gonna finish up on why Silent Hill 2 has two endings, and I can actually give you some satisfaction on Silent Hill attracting a psychopath, because there is a lead into that.
Okay, let's do that, and then we should maybe... Then maybe we should keep going.
Because we've got other games to talk about for horror. Lots of them.
It is not all Silent Hill, unfortunately. That's probably a direct quote from Konami.
It's not all Silent Hill, probably.
Yeah.
But no, so the reason why 2 has two canonical endings is what happens is James goes into the water with Mary, they drown, and then he wakes up back in his car in the parking lot, and that leads to the scene of him looking at his own reflection, wiping his face, having to like breathe and take a minute, and he's just like, I'm not getting out of here. I'm not done. Okay, I'm here for a reason.
I kind of like that interpretation.
And that so it's interesting because that is something that the game will not tell you outright. That is something that the directors had to confirm, and you can only put together from things that exist in other games. And there's a reason for that as well. Because as Silent Hill 2 is going on, Silent Hill 3 is happening at roughly the same time, maybe a little after. And what happens is James, now knowing what he did to Mary, has to play through the role of being the unknowing James, who talks to Angela and Eddie and has to do it all over again. But he has to act like he doesn't know what he did.
That's partly the reason why I kind of don't understand it. It's like, why would he act that way? Why wouldn't he try to do things better?
So, and that is the player playing through a second time going, hey, can I change this? And that's where you get the non-canonical endings where he leaves with Laura to try and repent for what he did, or he goes with Maria and he ends up repeating what he did, because...
I prefer to think the ending with Laura is canon. I don't know, I feel like Silent Hill is one of those series that, in spite of being so horror-based, is oddly optimistic in its endings.
About that.
I mean, at least a lot of the time. I prefer those ideas, but eh.
The reason the Rebirth ending is canon is because to get the Rebirth ending, you have to get items that you would only know existed in Silent Hill from having played the first game, namely the Red Book, a Red Liquid, and the White Claudia. He gets items from the cult of Silent Hill, and he learns about the cult, and he learns about its religions, and starts to see why this world is manifesting under his creative power, and realizes that he can do what they were doing as a means to summon one of Silent Hill's gods to rebirth Mary.
Okay, that kind of makes some sense to me.
And doing so leads to the town becoming more powerful. That's why in Silent Hill 3, the cult goes out of Silent Hill to find Heather, and even more importantly, ever notice how Silent Hill 4 never actually happens in Silent Hill?
I mean, you go to Silent Hill at one point, but...
Yeah, but outside of that, you're mostly in...
Yeah, that's why Silent Hill is expanding outside of it.
Because of what James did. Literally, he summoned a demon and fucked it up.
That's a neat idea. But I don't know, like, I kind of am a big fan of the idea that Silent Hill is a lot about ideas of, like, redemption, I think. And I really like the idea that, I don't know, in spite of all that goes on, Silent Hill, a lot of the time has ultimately pretty happy endings. Like, you know, at least contained to their own game. Like, for example, Harry, he gets to leave with Sybil with a new daughter. I mean, he later dies, but...
I was gonna say, not only that, but Sybil and he don't stay together. As soon as they leave Silent Hill, she just kind of goes back to her life.
Well, yeah, because they didn't get together.
No. There was nothing happening in them leather pants, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately. No, I know, I mean, like, they got to leave... Like, they both survived, and they both got to leave Silent Hill. And I say together, like, they did it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I honestly say the happiest ending to come out of Silent Hill, and hear me out why.
Ending.
Watching Lisa swallow Kaufman into the underground.
Okay.
Like, you know what? You're a terrible person, Kaufman. Even if you tried to redeem yourself at the end, you did it selfishly. You got what you deserved.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Like,
yeah,
especially when you see what he did to Lisa in Origins.
I remember, didn't he, like, sexually harass her?
He sexually harassed her, he forced her to play as his assistant, and worst of all, she forced her into having a drug addiction. Like, he made the White Claudia.
Yeah, I remember that one.
So, yeah,
absolutely horrible
got
person.
What he deserved.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, like, I'm of the opinion that, you know, Silent Hill, for the most part, the games are usually about, yeah, guilt, but more importantly, finding a way to redeem yourself, but to yourself. Redeem yourself in your own eyes, and finding a way to move past that guilt and do better. Like, you know, Harry's insecurities about being a father, I think, or you know, James, because that's why I like the Laura ending, or you know, that's why I like such endings. It's just the idea of, you know, light at the end of the tunnel. Ultimately, there's kind of a happy ending. And that's kind of something I like about Silent Hill. It's not always so bleak and depressing.
It can have its happier moments.
Yeah, that's what I love about Silent Hill.
And
that and the Shibe.
That and to just kind of branch off from here into other games, because we promised this wasn't just going to be Silent Hill based. I would actually like to direct to summarize the reason why I bring up Silent Hill 2 being such a big explosion for horror gaming is that it was experimenting with, like, they were like, okay, everybody does zombies, everybody does monsters, what can we do to make this uniquely scary? And that led to later games that would come afterward. That's where you start seeing games like Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, which is a Lovecraftian horror game, and that hadn't been done since Alone in the Dark.
And even then, Alone in the Dark, the first one, well, it had its Lovecraftian elements, it was still a lot more physical to it, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then you
a lot more the monsters in front of you. But anyways,
Yeah, the psychological element hadn't been touched on as much until Silent Hill 2, and would later pop up again, and that's where you see games that, haha, time to bring up one that you actually cannot play on Twitch, Manhunt. Manhunt.
I've heard a lot about it.
So
you know what? I'm gonna look up.
The premise of Manhunt is this man wants to make snuff movies. And so he holds someone, I forget if it's a daughter or wife or what, but he holds people that this man loves hostage and then forces him to kill people in a prison cell for this, like, captor's entertainment so that he can record it for a movie. That is the entire premise of Manhunt, is that this man is being forced to kill other people.
Okay.
In as brutal a way as possible.
Shit.
It's gut-wrenching, it's horrific, it's full of all kinds of blood and splatter and gore. But again, it's the premise of it that was so unique. And it took horror again in a different direction. That was only a year or two later. And then you get Fatal Frame 2, which did the same thing as Fatal Frame 1. Someone looked through Japan's like local horror stories and local folklore and made a horror game based on that, where you have to exorcise spirits based on those folklore incidents. And that remained true to Fatal Frame games from then onward, was that they would all be based on actual historical haunted grounds and incidences in the real world. Which in and of itself is very fascinating.
That and trying to save a failed console.
The PS2?
The Wii U.
But then, there's one other game that Team Silent would come up with.
Was not more haunted ground than the Wii U. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that Fatal Frame 4 wasn't as good, though. It wasn't.
Much about the game. I remember I had this like Nintendo Club magazine that talked about the game though.
Yeah. Fatal Frame 5 was good, but 1, 2, and 3 are still like the best ones in my opinion, especially 2.
Did a new one come out on the Switch recently?
Are they making another one?
I'm pretty sure, or maybe it was like a port of the Wii U one.
Maybe. But leading to like different games that had different versions of Fear, outside of Silent Hill, the original Team Silent had one more game in them that they were gonna put out, and this is another one that failed commercially outside of Japan, and that was Siren, otherwise known as Forbidden Siren.
Oh yeah. Are you going to play that one?
I plan to play Siren 1, or actually, you know what? No, I don't hate myself enough to play that game.
Fair enough.
But I do plan on playing Siren Blood Curse, which is a faithful remake of the same storyline. It's just
I have heard very because I wasn't able to watch to its full extent your Rule of Rose and Haunting Ground playthroughs.
Yes.
But because I wasn't able to watch them entirely, I decided to look up, like, these sorts of ending explain videos that I like. And I found this reviewer called Nitro Red. And,
oh, yeah. I actually do know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and I watched his Siren videos too.
Siren is an experience. The original Siren is an unforgiving experience, and it is absolutely rage-inducing. If you're going to play Siren for the storyline and not for the gaming experience, I would suggest actually going to the PS3 for its 12-episode remake of the original storyline called Siren Blood Curse. It's the same game, it has the same mechanics.
Didn't it add, like, quite a lot when it comes to the story? Like, the entire, like, foreign student stuff?
But it was all stuff that existed in the original game. They just, again, they took they actually, I think it combined the first two games.
Kind of. I do know that, but it's like, it just made some characters American.
Yeah, but But outside of that, it really wasn't a lot of change. The storyline was the same.
That being said, it was very. It's just they added a very clever form of localization there, like having the Japanese characters speak in Japanese with subtitles, and the American characters speak in English, and like have the Japanese people speak with the Americans in like fairly thick Japanese accents.
In broken.
And not too broken English, but still very thick accents. Well, and having the Americans speak to the Japanese people in Japanese in very broken Japanese.
Yeah, like you could hear the American characters like "Doi tashimashite, watashi wa da," and it would sound like an American trying to speak Japanese.
Yeah, it was. I think that was very clever.
And it makes for good localization. It made for a very successful DLC exclusive game on the PS3 until they released the physical copy got very few releases, but they released it in episodes that would release, I think it was like once a week, until they released all 12 episodes. And I happen to own all of them, so you bet I'm playing all of them eventually.
I'm pretty sure they are also on PSN.
I have them on the PS3, and I have like the original versions because you know me, I'm a nerd. But I bring up this game specifically because of its sight jack mechanic. That was something unique to that game, and it was a cool concept. The only thing that's unfortunate is that
I actually think because it was actually kind of taken from Metal Gear Solid 2, because because in easy mode, I think that I remember this. I'll have to check if I'm not just making this up. I remember this very clearly. In Metal Gear Solid 2, if you're hiding in like a locker or something, and you're being hunted for, in the easy difficulty, in like the mini-map, you could actually see the first-person perspective of the closest guard looking for you.
Really? Oh, that's so cool, though.
In like the radar.
That's actually kind of cool, though.
Yeah, it was actually really clever. It's only, I think, in like the easiest difficulty, though.
But then they turned it into like a thing of horror. And let me tell you, the only thing about the sight jack in the original PS2 versions of Siren and Siren 2, which by the way, Siren 2 never left Japan. I don't think that one even went to Europe.
No, it did go to Europe because it did have a dub. It did have a dub, and it was It was a famously bad dub because they just had the Japanese voice actors talk in English.
Oh, no.
In very broken English, very poorly, and it was like really annoying for a lot of people.
Oh my god, pardon the yawn. I might need coffee. But the I just remember like playing the first game, and I could only get like 2 chapters in before I finally just got. I wasn't even scared. I was just so angry that I was just like, I can't play this. Because the thing that Blood Curse did right that the first game didn't really do is sightjacking wasn't a very clear and cut mechanic, and you could end up unintentionally sightjacking things that you didn't want many times, only to get noticed by the thing you were trying to sightjack, and then you just sightjack yourself getting decapitated. Go ahead, ask me how I can depict that so clearly.
Yeah, like, that's kind of a bit of the appeal, though. The idea of, like, you might accidentally sidejack someone who just so happens to be, like, right behind you.
But it happened so often, and it was such a clunky mechanic at the time that it was just frustrating. In Blood Curse, however, they did make one small difference that makes a world of difference. Instead of having the sightjack take over your entire screen and be a super clunky implement, they have it so that you are focused in a corner, and the majority of the screen is whatever you're sightjacking. So you can see...
Although I hear it did bring, like, some technical issues because it was, like... It brought, like, the frame rate down or something.
It did. It brought the frame rate down a bunch, but that... I don't know. I would... Sorry, I'm adjusting a pillow here. Some call that a technical issue. I actually call that kind of a charm. Because imagine trying to, like, see through your own eye in front of you while trying to look through someone else's eyes in the other eye. Your ability to react to something would slow down considerably.
I mean, fair enough, I suppose, but, like, I think it, like, slowed it. I mean, then again, it probably was, like, some weird, technical thing, but still.
Mm-hmm. But I could go on about Siren for a while. I want to take a little bit, I want to go a little bit more into the future, with a game I'm surprised is not on this list because we had just mentioned it. I believe it was either 2002 or 2004, somewhere around there. We had someone had taken the psychological horror a step further as production was being made on Resident Evil 4. And they didn't want it to be a tanky game anymore. They had made ideas and scrapped them, and made ideas and scrapped them, and made ideas and scrapped them. And that led to 2 very successful games, and one that's really, it wasn't good. I just played it recently, and it was not good.
What game?
That was Cold Fear.
Cold Fear?
So, Cold Fear, originally they were made using Capcom's assets, but then Ubisoft wanted to take...
Oh, okay, you said enough. Ubisoft, okay.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, no, go ahead.
So Capcom let Ubisoft make a game using some of the assets, which... Originally, they had an idea of Leon being on a boat. There was gonna be a section where Leon's on a boat crossing the ocean, and he has to deal with the zombies on it, but they decided to scrap it. So, Ubisoft was like, hey, can we use that? And then they took it a step further and made an entire engine on animating this boat in a storm, and you have to fight off a zombie horde as an American Coast Guard on a Russian whaling ship.
That is a very, very messy premise.
It was a very promising idea, though. Like, the concept was, the challenge was, the boat would be rocking back and forth while you're having to aim your headshots. That is challenging and unique. However...
Yeah, that's pretty clever.
However, it's still implemented in a fairly tanky third-person style of horror. And the problem I have with Cold Fear is that it has no context. What's a storyline? If I hit a point where I'm in a game and I'm saying, what's a storyline? That's not a compliment. That is an insult.
Yeah.
There is a line in the game, I kid you not, there is a line in the game where our main, Coast Guard protagonist dude is like, I just met this random Russian girl. She happens to be the daughter of the lab guy that we're after. And also, she's kind of really hot. But, like, that's kind of, like, how he reacts to her for the entire game. And when he's trying to take down this transmission thing going on at an oil rig so that the guy in the CIA can help direct him with his course, the guy in the CIA has this line of, like, what, you gotta go help your girlfriend? And he's like, she's not my girlfriend, you know that. And the CIA is like, oh right, you'd prefer them being shot than undead. And then he's just like, can we just drop it? And I'm just like, hold up! And then they never touch on it again.
That's kind of a neat line, though.
You prefer yours shot than undead. I'm sitting here like, wait, did that just imply that he had to shoot a lover of his? That's a backstory I kind of want to hear. Oh, you're not going to tell me anymore? Oh, you're not going to give me any more... No, we're not. We're going to give that one dramatic line and then leave it at that? Really? Okay, thanks,
no.
game.
I'd rather it was that than implying something very different.
But my point being is the whole game is like that. Like, that is every
Because I feel like that line can also imply necrophilia.
It's like, no. Like, this
Sorry.
is what the game is gonna give me. No, not you. It's just like, that's what I mean by this is a bad game. Like, The gameplay itself is a little clunky, but otherwise manageable. It's frustrating. The problem that I have with the game is it has so much potential in so many different directions, and explores none of them.
Yeah.
And that is unfortunate. However, these Resident Evil 4 assets did create 2 of the best horror games that you've probably never heard of. One of them being Haunting Ground.
Haunting Ground, and the other is...
Devil May Cry.
Oh. I mean, of course I've heard of Devil May Cry.
Well, yeah, okay, everybody knows Devil May Cry.
Which, by the way, I've tried playing the first one. It's just... It is not
It's a clunky mess,
best.
right?
It's kind of clunky.
But also, like, it's neat to imagine that Dante's model is based on what Leon was going to look like in RE4.
Yeah. And again, the voice acting. My problem isn't so... Devil May Cry 1, 2, and 3 are very good examples of what I mean with this voice acting thing. It's not the voice acting that bothers me, it's the audio quality.
So, would you play the HD remastering where they actually upped the voice quality?
I tried playing the HD remaster. That's
Really?
That's the one I have. I don't think that they did a very good job in the cutscenes.
Huh, I'll have to replay, because I have the original PS2 copies for those, and I freaking love Dante's voice acting in Devil May Cry 3. I love, who am I kidding? I love Dante, period. I love how sassy he is. I love his snappy
He's a
comebacks.
fun character. He's a fun character, and I like his voice acting.
He's a cheesy nerd. Everything he does is just like so stupid, but we love it. He literally got away with being Michael Jackson.
And you know what? Fuck it. Fuck it. I'm installing Devil May Cry 4.
I'm gonna what?
I'm installing DMC 4. I have the entire series. It's just in my Steam backlog.
Oh my god. I probably, if I play one Devil May Cry game, that is going to be a binge for an entire year where I play all 5. Are you going to play the Devil May Cry, DMC Devil May Cry remake? No.
Do it though.
No. I played it once, and it's like, oh, dude, you're just saying that because it was a poor remake of Devil May Cry. Like, no. It's a bad game.
If you do it, I might forgive you play Ultra Despair Girls.
The only redeeming thing to come out of that DMC...
Okay, I won't forgive that.
I have my biggest qualm with Devil May Cry, yes, that's the actual title, I'm not making that up.
Yes. I know.
Is that... do I think a reboot of Devil May Cry is a bad idea? No. I actually think that the idea they were originally going for... the original trailer made it look like it was going to be like this heavy metal, like punk rock badass type Dante. Did I have a problem with him having black hair? Absolutely not. Because in the original trailer, he still had some of the similar characteristics of what made Dante Dante. And also he had a deeper voice that led to, like, this is going to be a different Dante. The idea of him, like, smoking a cigarette while holding one of the demons in a full Nelson in one, or like a half Nelson, and one arm just holding it by his neck and his arm, and it just kind of wiggles back and forth. He just kind of like this, and then he just puts it out on his face and gets back to work. That is Dante. To me, that is something Dante would totally do.
Yeah.
Not...
I mean, to me the big problem was the hair. Visually, to me the big problem was the hair.
I didn't have a problem with the hair. The two biggest problems that I have with the game. One, when there's a scene where a mop falls on remake Dante's head, so he has the similar, like, red jacket and white hair.
And
not in a million years. That scene could have been handled so much better.
I would have just said something like, maybe someday, or something like that.
No, like I would imagine him just kind of looking at the mirror and being like, nah. It's the fact that he specifically looks at the player and says, "Not in a million years." That is insulting your fan base.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even need him to go like, "Huh, maybe someday," or "Huh, no." I would have laughed if he was just like, "Ew," or just said something like really stupid and smarmy at that moment, just like, "No."
I mean, to me, it should have been something like. I feel like that would be somewhat insulting too. To me, it should be more like, "Oh, hey, that's kind of hot," or something like that. I don't know.
Or, but I what I can imagine that Dante being like is just the not in a million years, but at the very least, don't like angle the camera away from the player, so it's just him looking at the mirror, and then he just kind of does this like, nah, like that. That would have specifically angle it so he's not looking directly at the player.
Yeah.
But my other beef with it is, you're making an action-based game that is built on a combo hit and stylish attacks, and then you're going to give me enemies that limit my ability to make combos. Thanks. Thanks, game. Thanks, game devs. That's very brilliant. Also, color coding your enemies. I hate you. I'm not a 5-year-old playing Devil May Cry. Even if I was a 5-year-old playing Devil May Cry, the thing that made Devil May Cry fun wasn't the weapons, it was the ability to, like, you got a new... The storyline was nice, the character models are awesome. Oh, who am I kidding? The storyline's fantastic. But the best part of Devil May Cry is just the action aspect of how stylishly can I use this weapon into another weapon to keep on comboing in midair? How long can I keep comboing in midair just for fun?
Yeah.
That's the charm of it. And my beef with the color coding is certain weapons only hit certain enemies, and that action alone not only nullifies the combo hitter, but it makes the player feel like a dumb 3-year-old who, even me as a 5-year-old, is like, I'm just using a weapon to bonk the enemy. Why are you color coding this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not stupid. Also, that's dumb. But I'm just gonna state this right now, that's purely my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. Some of you may think the DMC reboot is an amazing game, and you know what? Good for you. I'm happy that you have a game that makes you happy. It just does not make me happy.
Yeah. Have fun being wrong.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong. This is my opinion.
It's fine. I know, but it's like, I like saying that as a joke.
Everyone's entitled to their stupid opinions.
Yes. It's either being stupid, wrong, and stupid.
There's nothing wrong with being stupid. I love quoting that, though. That was a Game Grumps thing that I love quoting whenever someone's like, I don't think you're wrong, I just think everyone's entitled to their stupid opinion.
I thought that was.
But also, I say that on the pretense of, I hope you realize this is a joke.
Yeah, of course.
This is me being a tomfoolery.
Like, I always also say it this way. Hey, it's fine. You're allowed to be wrong.
You're allowed to be wrong. But in terms of, like, horror... Well, I guess Devil May Cry actually does technically count as a horror game by the fact of it is still horrific imagery and gothic imagery. It was the beginning of, like, real gothic gaming, entering the action scene. And that is definitely something that branches off of horror gaming. So I'm glad we were able to talk about that.
Yeah.
But in terms of revolutionizing horror, I feel like the whole psychological thing of Silent Hill 2 would not be properly done again until Haunting Ground. Because Haunting Ground messes with your head and makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The entirety of the game. Especially when you realize that the main character is 16.
I mean, for Haunting Ground, it's... I don't know, I feel like more than horror, they really wanted more than anything to do...
Like a thriller.
Kind of like a thriller, yeah, but like to be very uncomfortable. And that's kind of the point. It absolutely works. having uncomfortable imagery can make for absolutely excellent horror. It's just like, I feel like there's a difference between making something uncomfortable and making something absolutely unpleasant. And there's value to making a... yeah?
I was going to just say, with Haunting Ground, the thing that makes it uncomfortable is the fact that it's not the imagery that's disgusting, it's the implications.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a game that shows a kind of fear that I, despite being non-binary with the gender I was assigned with at birth, it's a kind of fear that I will never be able to experience. And it's a unique spin, and it got me to think on things. Like, I actually sat down with a lot of my female and assigned female at birth friends about this. And they're like, oh no, they're like, this is a genuine fear for anyone who has these biological parts in their body. Like, this is a genuine terror. And it's like, oh God. So some of them were like agreeing with me, like, yeah, welcome to how it feels. And
I absolutely agree that it really does. I don't know how to explain this, but it really does help the experience that, you know, even if, because biologically it's not fear you can have in the same way.
Well, to this day, older men.
All right.
I will bluntly say that to this day, there is still a problem of like older men grooming younger women to be the kind of partner that they want, and almost like forcing them to live that way, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, there's still very. It's still very much a problem.
It's a very prominent problem, and like. There are people on... There was this guy on TikTok who got shut down twice, and then he went on Twitter and he was like, why did I get shut down? There should be a vote to, like, not have me on there. And a bunch of his followers were like, yeah, he didn't make anything bad. And then it cuts to him saying something along the lines of, like, I believe in true love at first sight. Like, your soulmate is your soulmate. Age doesn't matter. I mean, who cares if she's 12? What? Yeah. It was like, okay, you're saying good thing, you're saying good hold up, I don't like where this go. Hold up. Hold the front door and leave it. Good sir, you are 29. Do not talk like that. You have just lost your right. But this is a man speaking publicly on the internet with thousands of followers. What did I do wrong?
Or, technically, biologically, that's the age of reverse fertile. Fucking man.
Well, and again, bringing it to Haunting Ground, it's interesting that they chose to make this as a horror game. And I really like that they did, because in this time frame, horror is still very experimental, but it is becoming very popular, and it became a way to convey messages. Like, there were a lot of games that touched on, like, a killer being someone who was bullied throughout their whole... Like Eddie. Eddie was someone that could have been prevented.
Yeah.
By just not being a jerk to him. Like, if someone had actually stopped and helped him, he might not have become that person. Now, granted, I'm personal viewpoint, there are some people who just mentally are wired in a way that they are going to be harmful to themselves and everyone around them and the entirety of their society. That is an unavoidable truth. There are just people who are that. They are just evil.
I don't know. I think that there's people who have certain tendencies, but who... I think that... How do I put this?
I was going to say about the flip side to that.
I think everyone always has a certain, like, I don't know,
amount
moral...
of evil.
No, like, everyone is always going to be... Like, even if you have more violent tendencies, you always have this sort of, like, moral responsibility to try and avoid them, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's some people are just hardwired that they're going to live their lives just with the choice to be harmful.
Yeah.
Whereas there are people who have that tendency, but if you can see them making the effort to not be that, help them. Like, be willing to be kind to them. Give them a new form of tendency. Give them a new outlet. Like, there's a lot of ways to outlet those tendencies. Some people do it through art. Some people make movies. You know Rob Zombie? You know Rob Zombie, who is a musician and a famous film director that I love with all of my heart?
I know of him, yes.
So, do you know why his focus is solely on, like, horrific imagery and, like, a lot of gore and stuff?
No.
When he was a child, he went to a circus, and he watched, I forget if it was a clown or if it was I forget if the clown was the victim or the killer, but he watched someone get stabbed and ripped to death right in front of him at a carnival as a child. And he...
Yeah, no, that is actually horrific.
But because of this horrific incident, it didn't terrify him, it fascinated him. And it became his obsession. And so he turned that, rather than become like a homicidal lunatic, he turned it into a stage. He turned it into like, hey, what if I made horrific imagery as like a media format?
He felt like it was... I don't know, like... It was a way to vent that.
It was a way to vent that fear and what he felt that day as a child that just traumatized him for the rest of his life.
Hmm.
But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's some people just get this. I'm gonna stop saying the word evil just because that feels cheesy and it's too vague and ambiguous. Some people just have those latent violent tendencies in them, and something happens that wakes it up. But then it becomes the person's choice of, do I give into this feeling, or do I find another way to let it out without actually harming anyone? Cut to people who box, cut to people who play football. There's sports, there's art, there's film, there's gaming, there's reading. Some people just go into demolition. They have the tendency to want to destroy property, so they go into demolition where they're paid to destroy property so someone else can build there. There's so many ways to outlet these non-socially acceptable tendencies, and there's ways that invade... Sorry?
There's this time it reminds me. There's this place I really should try and visit sometime. I saw it once. It looks neat, and it's basically just come here. We'll set up a bunch of we'll set up a brick wall for you, and we'll give you a sledgehammer. Go nuts.
Yeah, like that just sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
But again, you're being destructive in a controlled environment.
That's very important. I absolutely agree. That is very important.
And I am sorry that I totally derailed on... I swear I had
no
it here.
Don't worry.
Now I remember. It was some people didn't like Haunting Ground, and leading into the next game I want to talk about, Rule of Rose, which does the same thing. It portrays a very disgusting message. But it's based on things... Obviously, for Rule of Rose, it's not like all of these things actually happened to one girl. However, in the 1930s, a lot was happening. And a lot of things that today are not considered socially okay. Like,
yeah.
The underlying message of Rule of Rose was that, hey, children can be terrifying. Or, like, hey, children and adults can be equally terrifying.
I mean, Rule of Rose was kind of, I think, just a sort of Lord of the Flies kind of deal, you know? Of, you let children build their own societies and they won't.
They won't. They'll have anarchy.
Except it's not anarchy, I don't know what it is.
They had a hierarchy, it just wasn't a logical one. Because
I mean, by definition, that would not be anarchy.
The fear of children isn't that they will do wrong, the fear of children is that they are not experienced enough to know better.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it.
But again, some people are like, why are you portraying like bad things happening to these children, and that's disgusting, and that won't fly on the censors over here. I'm like, but you're missing the point. Like, we're choosing that.
Also, the bad things were happening to the adult. The children were the bastards doing it.
Well, okay, part of the implication of what made Rule of Rose difficult to sell was a particular chapter known as the Mermaid chapter. Which...
Oh yeah, I know. I know the imagery. I don't know much of the context behind it.
So, okay.
I just feel like the kids decided to like sew woman's legs together or something like that.
No, there's more. There's a lot more to it than that. Brace your barf bags. This is going to get very uncomfortable.
I'm not someone that gets very buffy, thankfully.
Are you okay if I go into this one?
Go ahead. Like I said, I'm not someone who gets very buffy like that.
So the real premise of the Mermaid chapter is it's Jennifer's memories coming together and just kind of remembering things that happened in side glances. So that's why all of the horror that's happening is kind of just in the background and ambiguous at this point. Because everything she had only seen like through keyholes or heard through closed doors. But what had happened was that the old man, who was the director of the orphanage, got one of the older girls pregnant.
Oh.
And then forced her to abort the child.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why there's like surgery marks on her stomach in particular. Like if you look carefully at the boss model, her gills are on her wrists, which are representing self-harm, and then the sutras at her stomach, which are formed in the shape of a C-section.
But what is that's the one thing that confuses me. What is the symbolism of the
legs?
You know, the fact that it's a mermaid, yeah.
That she will never be able to love. She will never be able to have like a loving wedding. She has been tarnished as a woman. This is in the 1930s again, mind you. She is trapped.
Yeah, that is not something we believe.
That's not something that we believe to this day, but to that time frame, she has been.
And unfortunately, to a lot of people today that we like to call assholes.
The blunt wording of it is, to someone who would be leaving the orphanage as an adult and probably would only make it through society through marriage, she is now what would be considered tarnished goods.
Yeah.
Which is, again, something that they were like, this isn't gonna fly in this country, we don't want that here.
An absolutely horrific thing that unfortunately was a real train of thought
still is
too many people
a real trauma
thought about.
But
yeah, no, I think that my thing about Rule of Rose and games like that is just I don't know. Rule of Rose is interesting because it does it in a very effective way. Like, it never feels like just sort of like shock or gross out stuff, you know?
And that is the brilliance of this game, is Haunting Ground is horrific, but it's in your face. It is, she is going to birth the next generation. She is going to be the womb in which I am reborn. These are lines in the game, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
It is disgusting and in your face on purpose. Rule of Rose does the same message, if not a worse message, but subtly. It does it in ambiance and in the background, and you can only figure this out if you actually sit down and look at the game. But because of the mechanic of, I am following a dog, there is nothing else happening around me, I do not see anything happening in the background, I am following a dog, you miss a lot of this. I got scolded because I played the Mermaid chapter, and at the end of it, I was just like, why did everyone say that was so scary? That wasn't that bad. And they were like, no, you're playing it again now. And then And then I watched it again as I was editing. I was like, oh god, oh. But it's because I'm no longer the player focused on the dog.
You're someone who gets very affected by sort of this kind of shock stuff, aren't you? I remember when you were still playing Danganronpa 2 when you reached the end with the Junko thing.
So, permission to divulge a little bit and break away from the horror games for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I am someone who has experienced these, like, witnessed and experienced some of these things in the real world. And to me, it is, on one hand, it brings back nasty memories for me when I see some of this shock value, and like, for a moment I get to temporarily relive that. But also there's a part of me that is like, please make this public. Please make things like this publicly known. There are people who suffer because of this, and I want this to be seen as disgusting, because no one deserves to suffer like that.
I think that...
As someone who has suffered these things.
Yeah,
Sorry if that, like...
No, that is fully understandable. Like, I guess I kind of understand what you mean by that.
If I say about all the things in my life, no one would believe that I'm still alive.
Which, by the way, then, quick advice. Danganronpa 3 isn't as fucked up. It has some fucked up stuff, but not
I've already been
nearly.
Warned that Ultra Despair Girls is gonna hit some hard spots for me.
Ultra Despair Girls is... It has the darkest and most fucked up implications.
And I'm going into this knowing
things like that in the series. So, you know,
I think
be very aware of that.
I think the only game that I dropped because it just ruined my mental state so badly was Darkwood.
I
was
don't
not
know
ready
that
for
game.
that one. Darkwood is a top-down survival game, and it's not a bad game. I will outright say that it's not a forgiving game. It's a very difficult game. But with my depression, I have a hard time with games that don't give me the option to make a right choice or an ethical choice at some point. I have no problem with a game where it's like, I have to choose one thing or the other, and both of them come at a price. I don't mind that. But every choice in Darkwood is the equivalent of kick the puppy or drown the puppy.
Oh.
And it's like, why would I do either of these things? Why can I not do this option? Why is this thing not an option? I really don't have a choice, do I? And it's that feeling that as I kept going, it was like, I can't do this. Like, I with my personality and my headspace, I cannot play this.
Yeah, no, that is very understandable.
And that's fine. Like, even my friend who asked me to play it, like, we thought about it for a while. And when they finished it, they were like, are you sure you still want to do this? I was like, I'll do it. And then I played it, and I regretted it, and they did not blame me. I felt bad that I could never finish it, but... And again, what I'm making clear is, it's still a good game. I respect and acknowledge that it's an amazingly well-made game. It's just not for me.
Yeah, it's just one that you do not want to play. That's very understandable.
Mm-hmm. Same way I don't want to play any Barbie games, because I don't want to deal with Barbie dolls.
I'd say those are more fucked up.
Okay, but I actually, as a kid, like, Barbie dolls used to make me uncomfortable because I had a friend who played with them all the time. And, like, at first I wanted to play with them, but then I got bullied for that, and it was just like, now they just make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. Anyhow, so to try and complete this madness.
Can I bring up one more game?
Absolutely, please do.
Because I think this one might actually make you happy, because it'll lead into other games. We were talking about sci-fi horror earlier. I want to rewind the clock a little bit, go back in time, and talk about a horror game that wasn't a horror game, but it led to a series of dark sci-fi games and would later inspire what I honestly would call one of the greatest sci-fi survival horrors ever made.
And that is?
The original game that I'm pulling the clock all the way back to is System Shock.
You know what? Just today, I had to make a I made like a presentation at school on the intro of Bioshock, on like the first hour, and how it tutorializes the game, and how it's ideological, and it's sort of it's ideological and philosophical commentary, how they are so profoundly related to the rest of the game, and how they tie into the game gameplay-wise.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I want to bring this back. Like, part of why I want to have you here is I know this isn't per se a horror game, but I want to bring up the System Shock games because they led to System Shock, which the concept of Shodan in and of itself, while it might not be a horror game, is still terrifying.
I still need to play System Shock 2.
System Shock 2 is considered a horror game now. At the time of release, it was considered a sci-fi game. They added the horror genre to it later. And so what I'm wondering is, confession, I've never played Bioshock. I've never played any of the Bioshock games.
You absolutely should. They are fantastic.
I've been told 1 and 2 are good, but 3 is
System Shock. I disagree. I disagree. I think they're all great. Like, to me, it's... How can I put this? Bioshock 1 and 2... Bioshock 1 is easily one of the best games of all time. Absolutely no doubt about it, no questions about it. It just absolutely is one of the greatest games ever made.
It was supposed to be a spiritual successor to the System Shock series.
It is. It's directed by the same guy and all.
But that's for 1 and 2. That's why I've only heard that 3.
That's for 1 and 3. Ken Levine did make 3, Infinite.
Really?
He did not make 2.
Huh.
2 is usually okay. 1 is considered like I said, one of the best games ever made. Just masterpiece. Chef's kiss. Spicy meatball of level design again.
This is a good spicy meatball.
2 is a very good game in its own right. I actually think it's kind of underrated. Most people kind of knock it for not being unique enough. I think gameplay-wise it very much was. But the thing is, it didn't reach the heights of 1 in story and in themes.
All right.
Like, it was not able to be as thematically interesting as the original one was. And the best way I heard it is its highs aren't as high as the other games, but its lows are also not as low as the other games.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't reach the same mountains, but it doesn't have the same valleys. And Bioshock Infinite is almost the exact opposite, in the sense that its highs are the highest almost any game will ever have, but so are its lows.
So it's extremely good and also extremely bad.
Things that honestly deserve being knocked. Like, it has its things.
I feel like a lot of games in that time frame did. So Dishonored definitely did, and God bless. Like, I love Dishonored. I know the guy that made it. Like, it was one of my favorite games. It was the reason I got an Xbox 360. Not gonna lie. I wanted to support my mom's friend so badly. We bought a console just to play his game.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome.
But the other thing I'm leading up to here with this, it sounded earlier like you were getting ready to go, and I am leading up to the last game I want to talk about with you here, and then I'll end the video by listing a bunch of games that I feel like people should look up once you've had it all.
Okay. I will be here to try and comment on the games that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not just going to leave immediately. Like, we are going to have a satisfying and a decent end to the stream. Don't worry about that.
Oh, I'm more to the video because we're already like nearing the 3-hour mark.
Okay.
And that's going to be a lot for me to hit it. But the last game that I want to bring up, and the reason I go all the way back to System Shock, is that changed sci-fi horror, where Resident Evil changed survival horror, where Silent Hill changed psychological horror, and I'm gonna say right here and now that I've played the first two games and I get what the hype was about, this all leads up to 2008 and the release of Dead Space. Dead Space may by far be one of the greatest horror games I have ever played.
Zashi, how dare you?
Okay,
I am now downloading it on Game Pass.
Okay, you want me to do you a favor?
Yeah?
Play 1, play 2, and then stop. Don't play 3.
Play 1, play 2, then watch a sarcastic video essay on why 3 sucks.
Or you can watch me play 3 because I love suffering for the amusement of others, and I love having this running gag of, here, watch me play this game so you don't have to. Because
isn't 3 multiplayer?
3 is multiplayer. So was 2. After you beat it.
Okay.
But the premise of... Do you know what, like, the premise of Dead Space is?
Zombies in space!
Well, a little bit more than that.
I know it's a little bit more complex than that, but...
You don't care about spoilers, or do you want me to spare you this one because this is honestly an experience?
Be careful with the spoilers, but go ahead.
The entire premise is, you are going to investigate a planet-cracking ship. This is important. The planet crackers are going out into space because Earth has been officially dried out of resources. And so...
Like, intergalactic oil rig.
Like, sorry?
Like, an intergalactic oil rig, basically. Or, like, do you mean literally cracking like a Death Star?
Like literally cracking a planet and ripping out a piece of it to drill it for resources, and then just like pulling all the resources they can out of a planet.
Okay.
And when they do so, they uncover something in one of these particular planets, and something about what they uncovered like unlocked this alien race that would infect dead bodies and make them come back to life and become hyper aggressive.
Okay.
And that is the most I can say without spoiling some really intense story points.
Okay. I am very interested to play this.
I will say this because this is within like the first chapter, so it's not really a story spoiler. In fact, me saying this will probably spare you some grief. The other thing that made this game revolutionary is this is a zombie-style horror game where shooting the head does nothing. In fact, it makes it worse.
Okay, that's actually kind of clever.
So what you have to do is shoot their limbs.
Okay.
This is actually revolutionary. Your weapon of choice. You're not even like an action hero or a starfighter. Your character is an engineer with a mining tool. a plasma cutter that is designed to, like, cut into a surface and rip ore out of it. Very effective as a weapon, though.
I would imagine that if you... I mean, even in real life, if you put a drill in someone's head, they're probably going to die.
Well, and...
Not someone's head now, but still.
It's the thing about this is it's not that you're some big-time action hero. You just happen to be someone who would survive well in this specific scenario. Literally, if you were not Isaac Clarke, you would probably die. These things, if you use a normal gun that uses normal bullets or a plasma rifle that uses plasma rounds, you're gonna put holes in them. You're not gonna stop them. You're just gonna make them angry.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you have a plasma cutting tool that can actually aim at their limbs and slice them open and just rip them apart. That's what's effective about this. You just kind of happen to be the lucky guy here. And I love that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty neat.
Well, and he's an engineer. Him having some muscle actually makes sense. You're an engineer in space travel. To an extent.
Well, it does sound like a game I'll have to play. It's one that I think one of my classmates is doing a presentation on.
I will warn you that some of the death animations get incredibly gory. And I mean, like, you can see internal organs spilling out and spinal columns being exposed levels of gore here.
Oh.
Yeah, the premise of Dead Space 2 was similar to the selling point of Doom, which was literally, this game is so disgusting, your mom will never want to see you play it. Literally, fuck your parents, play this game. I'm not kidding, that was the selling point of Dead Space 2, was that it was more graphic than Dead Space 1.
Yeah, no, I can believe it.
But I would say the actual, like, proper selling point of Dead Space 2 should have been, hey, you thought our first game was scary, we pulled out all the stops, made this one scarier, and also the storyline is really, really, really good.
Yeah, which I can't wait to get to Doom Eternal.
Maternal?
Yeah, I played Doom a while ago. Fantastic game.
I still need to play 2016 and Eternal. I played one of the originals.
I played the original, I skipped 2 and 3 and 64. I might play them again at some point.
I played Doom 64. I actually played Doom 64 on an N64.
Oh, cool!
Oh, no. Let me tell
Is
you,
it bad?
I got a USB N64 controller for all my N64 emulators. I played with it for all of 30 seconds.
Cool.
And
why?
I played Ocarina of Time, and I kept accidentally having Link jump off the same cliff in Kokiri Village. To which I was
Why?
like, were the controls always this clunky? And all I hear in my voice call is, and off come the rose-colored glasses. Congratulations, your childhood games all suck.
I mean, to be fair...
Limitations of the console at the time.
I mean, not just limitations of the console. It's because, very fun fact about Nintendo at this time, the N64 controller was directly modeled after an alien's penis.
I'm sorry, what?
The N64 controller was modeled after an alien's penis.
Is that real? Like, that's... Like,
no,
that's...
I'm joking, of course.
I swear to God, no. What I do know about
this... It's such a weird fucking controller.
What I do remember is it was the first console to introduce a control stick.
It was the first console to introduce an analog stick. Correct.
Well, there was the Atari, but it was the first mainstream.
I mean, that's a joystick, not an analog stick.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference.
But the
hi, Obigavizu.
The fun thing that I remember about the N64 controller is that everybody thought it was omnidirectional. No, it was just that instead of 4 directions, you can now go 8.
Yes and no. So, okay, the difference between a joystick and an analog stick is that a joystick can only go in one direction,
I just
and
noticed I'm bobbing a bunch just because I'm eating on a beef stick, and I'm like, oh wait, the model moves when I'm chewing. Whoops.
a joystick only has. How do I explain? An analog stick has, like, you can pretty much like push it to to a smaller degree. You don't have to push it all the way, and it's still going to detect that, and it's going to detect that as a lesser input. Right, so like to walk, just press slightly on that direction. Whereas a joystick, you just press in that direction and it immediately detects it as the input.
It was very clunky. It was very experimentative.
Analog stick.
And then the PlayStation 1 immediately made it better.
Yeah, no, there's a reason why the PlayStation design, the DualShock design didn't change for like 3 generations.
Not until the... Actually, I think it's still the same even in the PS4.
I mean, yeah, the DualShock 4 is very similar, but it actually does have some design differences.
Really?
The DualShock, yeah, like it has the fucking the touchpad. It doesn't have a start and select button. It has the options and the share button.
Oh, that's true.
And it's a lot more rounded. It's not like the thighs, for lack of a better word. The thighs, for lack of a better word.
You're blurring out a bit again.
Okay. Am I good now?
Yep.
The thighs, for lack of a better word, are more round. It was a slightly different design, not very different. Like the DualSense is a very different controller. But still. The knowledge.
I will turn that into a question. As someone who is designing, for games and stuff, how do you think that translated from its like tank-based games into third-player style games into now these popular first-person shooters? Like, how would you say that control scheme changes how these games are designed?
So usually tank controls are very much a product of that time, because controlling a character in 3 dimensions D-pad is kind of difficult, but it can technically be done, but yeah.
It's just not.
And also, particularly because in games where you can not control the camera, but the camera is not fixed. Like, for example, Resident Evil, the original Resident Evils are not games I think needed tank controls, because they had a fixed camera angle. And, like, it's not that hard to... It probably was at the time, but at least in my experience, if the camera angle is fixed, it's not that bad. But on a camera that's free roaming, like say Silent Hill, tank controls are a lot more necessary, because if you don't have a second analog stick, then controlling the camera just can't be done, and it's very difficult to do actual movement, like in 4 directions, with a D-pad, if you also have to think about how the player is going to control the camera. Now, when the original DualShock was introduced, one of the not that many games had full-on camera controls, and even at the beginning of the PS2, they didn't for a while. Right, like the main games still used tank controls. But I think that one of the games that first revolutionized this is the Alien Resurrection game.
Alien Resurrection.
Yes, the one based on the ship movie.
Not the Alien Isolation.
No, Resurrection. So Alien Resurrection had a tie-in game that came out 2 years later, and it had a hellish history of development. And it was the first FPS game where you could control the direction in which the player is moving independently of the direction in which the player is facing. Most people associate that with Halo, but this game actually did it first.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after that, and more importantly, after Halo,
yeah, I remember that Halo took what Quake and Doom did as shooters, and basically made it streamlined by introducing a whole new playstyle.
I mean, yeah, but it's also
But mainly that camera mechanic made it all the different.
Yeah, because in Doom and Quake and other first-person shooters at the time on PC, you had the mouse. You had two separate inputs, one for player movement, WASD, and one for camera controls, the mouse.
Which was optional. In Quake 1, you could actually use the arrow keys for the camera and WASD for the player.
Yeah, other games did have that as well.
It was a nightmare.
It's not that... I imagine. Controlling the camera with 4 buttons is awful. Thank you, Nintendo. But, Again, N64, based on an alien's penis.
Let's see if I can edit that in just a picture of an N64 controller and just put a slap bar, a sensor bar on it with the oh my lewd face on it.
Please do. But yeah, so I think once Halo introduced, rather popularized, because it wasn't Halo that introduced it, like I just said. Mm-hmm. Once Halo popularized having 2 sticks in the same way, in 2 inputs, one for movement, one for camera, in the same way that in PC you have 2 inputs, one for movement, one for camera. In a lot of different games, this idea of, hey, maybe you should be able to move the camera independently of the player actually became a thing. Because if you realize it, a lot of games, when the C-stick was introduced, when the analog stick was introduced, didn't use it that way. Ape Escape used it as a way for you to catch the monkeys. That was the first game to use dual analog sticks.
Yeah.
Metroid Prime uses it as a fucking item select.
Mm-hmm. Because where you face Samus, you could actually turn her left and right with the control stick.
Yeah, because the original Metroid Prime is still tank controls.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I kind of want to play it on the Wii. Because they actually remove the tank controls, but they have the camera being moved by pointer.
See, I like the tank controls in Metroid Prime because they had the lock-on system.
I don't know.
What?
Did they remove the lock-on?
Sorry, you broke up again.
Did they remove the lock-on from the Wii?
No, but they made it so you could lock on and move the camera with the Wiimote still. But I like the way that Prime handled the lock-on system because you could fix Samus's position by just not locking onto anything and putting her in an aiming position, and then she just stays that way while you walk.
Guess I don't know. I tried playing Metroid Prime for a while. I do have it on the GameCube, and
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
I tried, and I can see why it's that good. Tank controls are just so uncomfortable.
Do you know
For me.
how it feels for me to have spent like 2 months on Metroid Prime, working so hard to beat it, feeling so proud that I finally beat Ridley and the Metroid Prime, and I left the planet and the credits roll, and then I see congratulations, 58% cleared.
Oh yeah.
I was like,
I can
what?
imagine.
What? What do you mean 58% cleared?
There's more?
Like, I
How
missed
dare you
half
give
of
me
the
more
game?
game? How dare you give me more game for what I paid? How dare you?
Well, I guess I have to play it again. Because I have this tradition of, if I beat it once without a guide, then I play it a second time with a guide.
Yeah, that's a fun tradition. Anyways, so... Actually, I have a friend, Poirier. I've talked to you about him. He showed me... Well, he wanted to show it to me, because it couldn't run properly, it crashed. But there's this mod for emulation that actually has Metroid Prime, but with traditional FPS controls. And I really want to try that.
I'd like that. Well, because Metroid Prime had a D-pad. Did the D-pad do anything on the GameCube?
I think it did, but I think it just selected different visor profiles or something like that. Anyways, but yeah, there we go. Horror games, hooray!
Horror games, knowledge, and just random talking about games and game development. Jace, do you have any final comments? Or questions that you want to ask about horror games?
Penis, yeah, that's my comment. Anyways, I think I'm pretty much done.
Alright. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here. I look forward to editing this. I'll let you know when I upload it. I'll probably upload this on November 30th, right before the last gameplay of the year.
Okay.
Alright.
Hey, absolutely a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for having me. Thank you all for...
Of course. I'll let you win the raffle again.
Thanks. It was either this or an NSFW pick of you, right?
Oh my lord, no, they don't need to know that then.
You gave me that choice.
Listen, my chat doesn't need to be sus of
NSFW NSFW artwork
art,
of the bottle. No, actually.
Oh my god, which people can
wasn't
commission,
gonna send lyrics. What?
Which, by the way, people can commission, wink wonk, hint hint, and I can be hired for this kind of art. Hint hint.
Wink wink hint hint.
Wink wink, hint hint, help me pay my bills.
Give them money.
I believe that everyone should get to enjoy the content and the comfort for free, but also give me your money because I don't want to live in a cardboard box. Thanks. That's another favorite joke of mine is starving artist, air quotes, I'm in a house enjoying mozzarella sticks fresh off the farm. I'm not a starving artist.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
The potential to be.
Anyway, yeah, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful time.
Yes,
are you gonna end the stream now?
Like I said, I'm gonna mention a couple of horror games in the recording. I may just pull a BRB screen and then play something for a little bit. I haven't decided, because, the long story short, I decided to end the Donathon for personal reasons. I can DM you about that later. But yeah, thank you for being here.
Okay.
I'm going
Absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna list a couple of games just for people to look up on my own, and then that's how I'll end the video. Stretch. Once again, everyone, if you're watching this video, you're checking out the stream, please check out Fake Emo Jace. Absolutely wonderful person. What? I'm allowed to shout you out. It's my channel.
Thank you. Please do.
There you go. I'm assuming you don't mind your clip being in the video. It's covering my face.
Please do.
Rude.
No,
Wait, is that the clip I think it is?
Yes!
It's the old man clip!
Oh, that was a...
Oh, it's sticking. Oh no.
Oh yeah, Twitch Guru has been doing that for a while, even for me.
I might load up like a different clip player for myself because congratulations, now no one can see my face. That is just stuck there forever now. Magnificent.
If you like hide and then unhide the Twitch Guru, I think it resets.
There you go.
Yeah, man, I missed
abusing
that
Grandpa.
cosplay. I should do it again
I'm abusing
sometime.
Grandpa, there it is. Sorry.
Wait, shit.
Really missed that cosplay. Such a good
What did you
one.
miss? Not much.
That was fun. That was fun. That was a great gameplay to watch. I am sad to
Yes.
say that the emulators that I found for the Metal Gear Solid games are not very, per se, reliable.
They are, MGS 2 and 3 are available on GOG.com.
Yeah, I got them off. The ones I got were off of GOG, but for some reasons, the specific ones I got there, I'll just hide and unhide it. Hopefully, that's better. For some reason, it didn't work out with the specific emulation that I had. I think I accidentally downloaded the Japanese version, so I'll have to double back and see if I can fix that.
Oh wait, no, my mistake. In GOG, it's Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yeah, like
But I thought Metal Gear Solid 2 was available.
I still need. Well, I also have someone that I might be able to get a connection to the Metal Gear 1, 2, and 3 from. Although, also, same sad story as when I tried to get into Fire Emblem. Apparently people judge me for never really getting into Fire Emblem until I tell them the first Fire Emblem game I played was Shadow Dragon. And then they're like, yeah, okay, that's a bad start. Same story with Metal Gear Solid. I start off by saying, so the first Metal Gear Solid game I ever played was Phantom Pain.
I don't think that. Phantom Pain is an excellent game. I mean, it's got its problems.
It was
But,
MGS. It was MGS 5. It was the first MGS 5 game.
You mean Ground Zeroes?
Yeah, that one.
Gameplay is fantastic, though.
But they were like, someone was like, yeah, you should have started on 1, 2, or 3.
It is not the best showcase of the series. I think Phantom Pain, not Ground Zeroes, Phantom Pain, is a very good place to start. It's where I started, actually. Mainly because it's the most accessible game of the series, and it's the one with the most, fleshed out gameplay. And, gameplay that's... How do I put this? Simply put, it's got perfect gameplay.
Alright.
It's difficult to appreciate if you did not play through the rest of the series.
Honestly,
Honestly,
Metal Gear Rising.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to appreciate the gameplay of 5 if you only now, if it's like the first one you start the series and you haven't played the others. But it genuinely is like Kojima just looked at what he had done before and said, okay, now let's just make it perfect. Like, seriously, absolutely no flaws about it. I genuinely think that the gameplay, the controls,
Let's make it better.
the basic, not just better. Like, I genuinely think it's the best that any stealth game can control. I genuinely think that.
I might have to watch you play Wolfenstein once. I think you might like those games if you haven't already.
I already played Wolfenstein, New Order and New Colossus.
Hey, Jace.
Really enjoyed them.
My body lies over the ocean!
I do not remember that.
That was the very first part of Wolfenstein: The New Order on the PS3.
Oh, yeah.
It's like-
Because of the coma.
He's
Yeah.
the Scottish guy on the turret in the helicopter, just like, come at me, you lousy pansies! My body lies over the ocean.
I do not remember him. Oh, it's because I
body
didn't.
lies over
Ah.
the sea.
That's the problem. I didn't pick the Fergus timeline. That's the thing. I didn't pick the Fergus timeline. I should have. I really should have.
Oh, it's so stupidly funny.
I really like the character of Fergus. He's a great character.
Well, that happens in the first. Well, still, whatever. For the time being, this is now a 3-hour video. Thank you for being here, man.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful time, you wonderful bastard.
You as well. You
And
absolutely.
the same to chat. Also, just one final thing I need to leave you all with. That'll be all. But wait, did it not work? Shit, it's not loading. Wait.
Oh, I've got it on my end. You'll hear it. I'm a hacking cutie!
There we go. Yes, you are. Bye!
Anyway. I'm gonna go ahead and just move myself over a little bit. There we go. I'm gonna take this as a chance to quick bring up some games that there are plenty of. Thank you so much for having me, mate. Thank you for being here, but also fuck you. Respectfully. There are a couple of games that I know we didn't touch on. We brought up Resident Evil, of course. And as long as I'm going to talk about the Resident Evil team, I want to bring up a couple of personal mentions of horror games that I myself have played. And there are ones that I don't really see all that often. I don't see people streaming them. I don't really see people playing them. And there are games that I honestly think deserve either a remake or at least touching up on and bringing up. In terms of psychological horror, I want to bring up American McGee's Alice. We were talking about Quake and some of the games earlier. American McGee, who was a member of Quake, wanted to try his hand at making his own game series, and so he made a platforming horror adventure game based on the 2 novels of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass, this being a continuing story after those 2 games, where Alice is psychologically traumatized after watching her house and family burn down. And so the first game is about her traversing through Wonderland to kind of put herself back together, leading to the sequel, Alice Madness Returns, where she has to balance between the real world and the real world which has been giving her trauma, and the mental landscape of Wonderland, where the representation of the inside of her head, where she is hallucinating and having to perceive the trauma through her own memories. Both of these are amazing games, and I'm very much looking forward to the release of Alice Asylum, which is going to be a prequel to the franchise. And to anyone who doesn't know about this, feel free to go on YouTube and look up American McGee's Alice Other Lands. There are 2 episodes. Both of them are on YouTube. They are no longer just DLC. You can no longer get the original videos, but American McGee himself released them on YouTube so that people are free to watch. They are 2 animated shorts, about 15-20 minutes each, that occur after the events of Madness Returns, where Alice uses Wonderland as a means to enter the mental scapes of other famous people in history. At least that was the idea. I don't know if this ever got pursued further, unfortunately due to lack of budgeting or lack of interest. Outside of that, we also mentioned the Fatal Frame games, which I would love to bring up again. Just because the first one isn't really touched upon as much as 2 is, but also I find that 3 is surprisingly not touched on as much as 2 is. I have not played this game myself yet, but I intend to play it in the future. And back on the topic of Resident Evil, there was a game made by the same team who made Resident Evil and also would later make Haunting Ground by the name of Dino Crisis. And that is a game that I've already played it once. I played it on stream once, and I definitely want to restart it and make a series out of that one, so you can look forward to that in the future as a potential horror game. It's very campy. It's basically a spoof on the fact that Jurassic Park was popular, so the developers behind Resident Evil wanted to try their hands at making a sci-fi survival horror game where you have to deal with dinosaurs instead of zombies. It is hilarious, but it is also very well made, the puzzles are very clever, and everything in the game, even the cheesy comments, all make sense. It was a fantastic game, and I would very much love to see a remake of it. Outside of that, another very famous title that we did not touch up on, that would become an inspiration for Haunting Ground, and Haunting Ground would be the spiritual successor for, is Clock Tower, which was a game that had a huge cult following, but it's because the original Clock Tower games never left Japan. You would have to find English translated versions to actually enjoy them. You can probably find mods that have English translations. This is a point-and-click horror game, either on the NES or the Super Nintendo, I can't remember which, but then it would lead to Clock Tower, which would have a spiritual 3D remake on the PlayStation 1, a Clock Tower 2, which would be also on the PS1, a full reboot of those two games, and Clock Tower 3, which was notorious for being a fairly unsuccessful game on the PS2. As far as I know, I've never played it, so I can't comment on how good or how bad it is. I can only go off of hearsay. I may find an emulation of it just to see if it is that bad. For all my commenting on Cold Fear, and all my, heckling at it by the end of it during the gameplay, which I'm sure y'all will see by the time this video's up, it had a lot of potential, and it is something that, surprisingly, I would actually love to see remade as a horror game, just because I think modern game developing engines could handle the premise that that game was supposed to have, but some better story writing and delivery could be done. Outside of that, the last game that I would like to touch upon, and one that I know the videos are already public for by now, is Illbleed, which was a horror game made by the developers of Team Sonic for the Dreamcast. This is another survival game where you would use the virtual horror lens, balancing between first person and third person, to navigate your way through cheesy B-lister horror movies made into the equivalent of virtual haunted houses, save your friends, and have a lovely day. I bring this one up because that same mechanic of balancing between first-person tank controls and third-person tank controls and first-person viewing controls while stagnant, would become a prominent control scheme later on the PS2 with the Project Zero Fatal Frame series, and you would see this again in later horror games as well, where the first-person, third-person would be a balance in having to deal with puzzles ahead. I think this is a brilliant mechanic in survival horror, and it allows players the ability to immerse themselves in the world and then break away from immersion when necessary. Outside of that, I have plenty of other horror games that I could list, Obscure being a good series, First Encounter Assault Recon being a personal favorite, especially 1 and 2, not 3, sorry 3, I did not like 3. And the last one I want to touch on as well, just to mention the name, is Condemned Criminal Origins, specifically the first one, not so much the second one. And yes, that is all that I can think of in terms of horror in this exact setting, and I hope everyone who sees this video and has been sitting in the stream has a wonderful Halloween. By the time this video comes out, I hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving, and get to enjoy a Merry Christmas in the future. Toodles! This is Cheshire the Cat signing off, and just saying, till then, take care, ta-ta for now.